The boy used the simplest sword drawing slash, yet shocked the professor present, because this was strength a student shouldn't possess, although it seemed Lonen only swung once. In reality, it was 3 strikes, and he deliberately slowed down the final cut to ensure the professors could see clearly. It was precisely this action that enraged Nabiros. While Lonen said expressionlessly, "Teacher, you frightened me." Nabiros asked, "Who taught you that sword technique?" Lonen replied in confusion, "What are you talking about? Nobody taught me." So Nabiros changed her question. "Did you see my movements just now?" Lonen said, "Yes, I did. You're remarkable." Drew the sword and made 3 cuts in an extremely brief moment. Nabiros calmed down a bit and said, "Yes, just like what you demonstrated." Then she abruptly changed her tone. "You arrogant brat. You deliberately slowed down the final cut to make sure we could see it clearly, didn't you?" Lonen was stunned. The reason he slowed the 3rd cut was to reduce the power, to avoid harming his own body, not because he looked down on the professor. But facing the angry Nabiros before him, his explanation seemed utterly feeble. The principal remained silent, only awkwardly averting his gaze, while the other 2 were dumbfounded, saying, "As professors, shouldn't we have noticed something?" A moment later, Nabiros sheathed her sword and slowly returned to her seat. She said, "I will teach you personally from now on." After returning to her seat, her emotions remained unsettled. The principal beside looked at the angry Nabiros and carefully pondered her words, "Teach personally." The principal understood. Nabiros had already accepted this child as her disciple. He turned to Lonen and said, "You've passed, but we still need to ask you one question. Why did you come to the Phillips Royal Academy?" After hearing this, Lonen lowered his head. Memories began to surface in his mind. The boy had used all his strength to kill what he believed was the most powerful 4-winged giant, thinking everything would be over. But unexpectedly, an even more powerful 8-winged giant appeared in the sky. 4 wings weren't the giant's limit after all, 8 wings were. At that moment, the boy was prepared to fight to the death. But another surviving woman disagreed with his approach. Instead, she strangely gave the boy a kiss. It turned out that 2.5 years earlier, 3 giants suddenly invaded the empire, destroying more than half of its territory in a short time. Only when Lonen's army joined the battle were they barely able to hold the giants back, but they paid a heavy price. The entire army was virtually annihilated, leaving only a severely wounded Lonen. He looked at the battlefield with slight sadness, but just then, a voice sounded, "It's been a long time since I've seen such a strong human." Turning his head, Lonen discovered the voice came from the dead giant. Angrily, he stepped on its face and said, "Half the empire has become a graveyard because of you. Why aren't you dead yet? Want to know how your 2 friends died? One was roasted by a red dragon. One was permanently sealed by a magician. Understand now, you damned creature." He had hoped these words would anger the giant, but it replied indifferently, "The children of the stars share senses. I know how they died, but we'll be back soon, and there are no humans as strong as you left on Earth." As soon as it finished speaking, Lonen cut off its head with one slash, saying, "Just die already. Stop talking nonsense." After doing all this, Lonen walked along the battlefield, only stopping when he saw the body of his old friend. Then he knelt down and said, "Why didn't you run when I told you to? Why be so foolish, sacrificing your life for so-called discipline?" While Lonen was immersed in grief, he thought he heard a cry for help. Dragging his wounded body, he followed the sound. It was the great Commander Andershan. She was still alive. Lonen felt a bit of comfort, but looking closely, the great commander's situation didn't seem promising either. She had lost an arm, yet she seemed not to care at all. Instead, she was concerned about whether the giant was dead. Lonen said, "Yes, I killed it myself." After hearing the answer, she seemed relieved. Tears fell involuntarily. "Thank you." Lonen took the opportunity to make a request. "Since you're so grateful, could you give these soldiers a proper burial? Because previously, soldiers' bodies were simply discarded. But now that everything was over, it was time to properly handle these matters." After speaking, Lonen began coughing violently, looking at the blood on his hand. He told the great commander he could die at any moment. Andershan asked him, "If you could live, what would you want to do?" A glimmer of light appeared in Lonen's eyes. He said, "I would probably go study at an academy. That was my dead sister's wish, but there's no hope for any of that now." Andershan angrily shouted at him, "Don't talk like that. The rescue team will be here soon." But just then the sky suddenly cleared. A ray of dawn light shone down, but the 2 stared with terrified eyes, because an 8-winged giant appeared in the sky, along with countless followers. At that moment, Andershan fell into deep despair. She said, "I've saved this world 3 times. This time, there's truly no way out." But Lonen drew his sword beside her. With determination, he shouted at her, "Great Commander Comrade, what are you doing? Quickly use your psychic power to throw me up there. My sword can't reach them. I'll teach these bastards a lesson." Andershan was stunned. He still wanted to fight in this situation? What a determined fellow. Then she kissed him and spat a pearl into his mouth. Andershan said, "This is a pearl that can reverse time 4 times. I've used it 3 times already. It's how I climbed from being a tailor to becoming the great commander. I'll give the last use to you, and when you see me again, please convince me to become a tailor." As she finished speaking, a flash of light appeared. When he opened his eyes again, Lonen had returned to his village from 10 years ago. Looking at the familiar scene before him, he was stunned. "Am I dreaming?" he said. Then he banged his head against a nearby tree, hoping to wake up. Soon after, Lonen accepted reality. The great commander's ambition was truly grand, expecting him alone to fight the giants. What could he do? After thinking for a moment, Lonen had an idea. He picked up a tree branch and ran toward the village entrance. But on the way, a group of bullies caught Lonen's attention. They had hung a boy upside down. Looking closely, they hadn't used ropes. It was magic. Lonen couldn't believe it. it, to find such rare telekinetic magic in this rural village. The yellow-haired leader viciously demanded money from the boy. The boy said, I gave all the money to my mother for medicine. I don't have any now. The yellow-haired boy was furious and immediately ordered the girl to use magic to hang him higher. But the kind-hearted Assam was unwilling. The atmosphere became tense. At that moment, Lonan hit Assam on the head with a stick and said, Stop, you'll kill him. The boy fell down on the other side. Meanwhile, the angry yellow-haired boy became even more furious. He said, What are you doing? She stops just because you tell her to? But Lonan grabbed Assam and said, Never mind him. Tell me where you learned your magic. Assam said, From a magic book I bought at a store. Lonan was stunned. She was this skilled with just a cheap magic book? Lonan's instinct told him this person could definitely be useful in the future giant war. But just then, he heard the sound of a sword being drawn. Lonan turned his head. The yellow-haired boy had charged at Lonan with a sword, saying, How dare you ignore me? Although the yellow-haired boy was physically strong, his sword stance was incorrect. Lonan saw through it at a glance and dodged sideways. Having dodged so easily, the yellow-haired boy felt anxious, but still pretended to be calm and said, You're really lucky. Lonan went along with it and said, Yes, I'm having good luck today. Seeing Lonan not fighting back, the yellow-haired boy became more aggressive. He said, Kneel down and beg, and I might forgive you, but I'll still cut off one of your arms. Of course I'll take good care of your sister. Every time I see her nice figure, I want to. Before he could finish, one of the yellow-haired boy's ears was cut off. Lonan was furious. His sister was his only weakness, and he wouldn't allow anyone to defile her. This scene frightened all the other bullies. He had managed to use a tree branch like a sword. Seeing this, Lonan took the opportunity to make them return the money to the boy. The bullies didn't dare refuse. They gave all the stolen money back to the boy, then fled. Meanwhile, Lonan made an arrangement with Assam. They would meet at this spot at 2:30 a.m. 4 days later, because they had something very important to do. After giving these instructions, Lonan hurried home, but hesitated at the door. Many questions troubled him. Should I apologize for leaving without saying goodbye? Should I tell her how much I missed her? Should I ask if she's been well? But when he finally saw his sister, Lonan only said, I'm back, and brought his sister's favorite flowers. His sister was overjoyed when she received them. She said, I never expected to receive flowers from my cold brother. Is there enough food? Do you want me to add more? Looking at the 13 dishes and soup before him, Lonan was dumbfounded and quickly waved his hands in refusal. Then changing the subject, he asked how old his sister was. His sister said, I'm 22 this year. That meant there were still 10 years before the giants invaded. His sister asked, Why do you ask? She hurriedly came over to feel his forehead and said, You don't seem to have a fever. Lonan grabbed his sister's hand, then said, No, I was thinking I'm going to go study at an academy. Hearing this, his sister was overjoyed. Then she jumped to the side and rummaged through boxes and drawers. Soon after, she brought out a bucket. It was filled with gold coins. Lonan couldn't believe it. He said, How did you get all this? His sister put her hands on her hips and said, I saved for 2.5 years, waiting for you to say this. But Lonan told her, This is far from enough. Because Lonan wanted to attend the world's top institution, Philip's Royal Academy. They had the most outstanding professors, the wealthiest financial support. Moreover, the academy had produced 3 world-class talents, Great Commander Andershan, Sword Saint Julafan, and the Witch. So to defeat the giants, this was Lonan's only choice. 4 days later, Lonan went to the arranged meeting place with Assam. The first thing Lonan did was put down his backpack, then said, Come on, control me. Use telekinesis to lift me as high as possible. Lonan wanted to test her magic power level, but Assam was reluctant. She said, I can't do something so dangerous. Lonan said, It's fine. I bought insurance. Hearing this, Assam's heart was finally at ease. So Assam began reciting a spell. As the magic activated, it was as if an invisible hand lifted Lonan high up. The height was even greater than Lonan had imagined, although it lacked stability. Telekinesis was essential for fighting flying giants, and this kind of magic was extremely rare. Lonan raised the corner of his mouth with satisfaction and thought, She's mine. Meanwhile, Assam began to tremble. She said, Can I put you down now? But in the next second, Lonan took up his sword and swung it to cut through the magic, then landed safely. Assam exclaimed in shock, What did you do? Cut through magic? Lonan just punched her and said, Nothing, just an acrobatic performance. Actually, this question had troubled Lonan for a long time. He didn't know why his sword was so special. Not only could it cut through magic, but it could even kill giants. But these things could be researched slowly. Now there was something more important to do. Then Lonan threw the bag to Assam and said, Let's go. We must finish before the moon disappears. After we do this, we can become students at Philip's Academy. Assam was astonished. Did I hear right? Philip's? That's a place that only accepts elites. You have powerful swordsmanship to support you. But I'm just useless. I probably can't go, right? Lonan said, I know, although you're stupid, timid, and cry a lot, but that's okay. You can start changing now. Otherwise, you'll just waste your life idling around like those thugs. Hearing this, Assam's face turned red. It was the first time someone had shown such concern for her future. So she quickly agreed. While Lonan revealed a mischievous smile, his plan had succeeded. Soon after, they arrived at the goblins' dwelling place. Although they were all asleep now, it was still extremely dangerous. Lonan's target was the treasure chest the goblins had collected. Lonan said, Let's begin. Use telekinesis to borrow all of that. Hearing this, Assam was instantly terrified. She looked at the goblins' 36-pack abs. She said, If they wake up, we're dead. Why don't we go back and think about this? But Lonan pulled her over and said, To enter Philip's Royal Academy, you need 2 things, high tuition fees and rich combat experience. So this kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Unless you have a better idea in that head of of yours? Assam said, idea? I don't have one. Lonan said, good, then let's get started. After speaking, Lonan opened his bag and said, just fill it up. Assam had no choice but to comply. As the magic activated, the goblin's treasures gradually fell into the bag. To avoid waking them, Assam had to use all her strength to control her magic. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. They quickly filled 2 bags. Lonan happily patted Assam's head and said, I knew you could do it. But even he hadn't been fully confident. He hadn't expected Assam to adapt so quickly. It seemed he'd found a good tool person. After a while, the two packed up their things. They were just about to leave when a group of people came rushing toward them, accompanied by ear-piercing screams. This made Lonan sense something was very wrong. In the middle of the night, had some abnormal person escaped from a mental hospital? Meanwhile, the green-haired goblin was awakened. The first thing he did upon waking was habitually check the treasure chest. The box was empty. The green-haired goblin quickly woke up the others and called an emergency meeting. They discussed where the treasure might have gone. But one of the goblins offered a different opinion. He looked at Lonan and Assam and said, could it be them who stole it? Realizing this, the goblins immediately charged at them. Seeing this, Assam was instantly terrified and collapsed on the ground. She said, shouldn't we return their things and apologize? But Lonan drew his sword and said, then what about the tuition? Do you have a solution? Whenever faced with situations requiring thought, Assam would become confused. She said, I don't. Meanwhile, Lonan looked at the sword in his hand. It was made of cheap steel. Given the hardness of goblin bodies, the sword would probably break after 15 swings, but there were more than 30 goblins here. But it would be enough. Lonan's mouth curved into a smile. Then he charged at the goblins. Almost instantly, the last goblin also died by his sword. Assam was dumbfounded. Lonan killed 3 with 1 sword strike. Then he just disappeared for a moment, and all the goblins were dead. Assam couldn't help but swallow. Had he already become this strong? Just then, Lonan said, don't space out. Go get the bags. Let's go home. After a while, the two set off for home. What they thought would be a comfortable job turned out to be quite difficult. Lonan stretched his aching body. It was probably because he was still growing. He would need to strengthen his physical training when he got back. But just then, Assam mentioned the screaming sound. She asked, what was that noise anyway? Lonan shook his head and said, I don't know. If I run into them, I'll knock their heads sideways. Meanwhile, a bow and arrow silently aimed at Assam from behind, but was easily blocked by Lonan. On the other side, the man who shot the arrow began apologizing, though his face showed no remorse. It turned out that when Lonan and Assam got the treasure, these two men had witnessed it, so they harbored ill intentions. Seeing their assassination fail, they decided to try another approach. Children generally have low vigilance against strangers. They came over and said, sorry kids, I heard a noise just now and thought there might be goblins. Kids? Lonan was so angry he broke the arrow in half. I've eaten more meals than both of you combined. After a moment, the man extended his hand again to apologize, but his eyes were fixed on Lonan's backpack. Lonan said, can't you hide your greedy eyes a bit better? Your acting is terrible. The man fell silent for a moment after hearing this, but looking at the child before him, he didn't think he posed much of a threat. So he gave his companion a look and continued walking toward Lonan, still with that forced smile, but he had secretly reached behind his back, gripping the dagger at his waist. He said, I should introduce myself. We are the Caliporo. As he spoke, he unexpectedly swung his knife at Lonan. Caliporo? Lonan thought while recalling, and casually countered, stunning the man. Now he remembered, they were those scum. Just then, while Lonan was distracted, the yellow-haired man also charged, but Assam noticed. Assam used telekinesis and directly controlled the yellow-haired man. Seeing this, Lonan gave Assam his first compliment of the day, well done. Then he took the sword from the yellow-haired man's hand and gave him a 7-star light slash. 3, 2, 1. When the countdown ended, the yellow-haired man split into 15 pieces. This scene terrified Assam. She said, Lonan, you really killed him. Lonan said with a determined look, I wouldn't let someone who tried to kill me live. Moreover, they're an infamous group. They poach, kidnap, and sell organs. If I wasn't here today, by the time someone found you, your grave grass would be 6 feet tall. But just then, a sack behind them suddenly jumped, startling them both. Could this be an animal they had poached? After saying this, Lonan untied the rope. In an instant, something flew out. Looking closely, it was a blue bird. How beautiful, Assam couldn't help but exclaim. It was her first time seeing a bird of this color. But Lonan's attention was not on the color of the bird, was on the bird's feet, because it was wearing power-sealing shackles. Wasn't this something used for powerful mythical beasts? What heavenly law had this bird broken? Just then, a greeting came from the bird. Mihi mihi. Assam was so startled she jumped. It talks, Lonan said with disgust. Are you an idiot? That's a type of remote communication magic. If I'm not mistaken, the speaker must be the bluebird's owner. On the other side, a strange figure was speaking into a magic array with a rough voice. He said, that's right. I'm a member of the Mythical Beast Research Institute. My bluebird disappeared yesterday. I couldn't contact it at all. By the way, who are you? Lonan grabbed Assam, who was trying to run away, and said, we're concerned citizens. Your bird was kidnapped. We rescued it. After speaking, he cut the bird's shackles with one stroke, then said, go back to your father. This action immediately filled the bluebird with gratitude. Then it stuck its bottom in his face. Lonan was stunned. Was this how it showed thanks? Fortunately, the bird's owner quickly explained, the bluebird wants you to pluck one of its feathers, because a bluebird's feather will permanently point toward the bird itself. It probably wants to see you again. When Lonan plucked the feather, the bluebird shot up and disappeared without a trace. Lonan wondered, is it really sure it wants to see me again? The next day, the two brought the treasure to the market to sell it for gold coins. The merchant examined necklace for a long time and offered 20 gold coins. Deal, Lonan happily agreed. Finally, someone who knew value. Thinking about the other merchant who said the necklace was worth at most 5 gold coins made Lonan angry. But now he had met someone knowledgeable. Then Lonan sold all the treasures he had brought. Meanwhile, Lonan reached into his pocket and pulled out a large purple object. The blue bird had left it in his hand when it left. He initially thought it was droppings, but it could shatter stones. Lonan's instinct told him this thing was definitely special. The merchant agreed. The merchant said, "Wow, this color, this texture, could it be?" Lonan excitedly asked, "What is IIT?" The merchant, bird droppings. Lonan was speechless. The merchant could only laugh awkwardly and say, "Actually, I'm not an expert either." Lonan sighed and put it back in his pocket, planning to find an expert to appraise it someday. Asim looked at him with disdain and said, "It really is just hardened poop." Changing the subject, Lonan asked the merchant, "Do you have any books about Philip's Royal Academy? We want to enroll, but don't know much about it." The merchant said, "Is that so? My daughter Maria is also preparing to go there. You can chat with her. She's coming now." Maria? Lonan was startled. He knew this name too well, but what appeared was a blonde woman. Lonan walked up to her and said, "Are you really Maria?" Maria said, "Yes, what's wrong?" Lonan was dumbfounded, because the Maria he knew in his previous life looked completely different. Then Lonan leaned close to her ear and said, "Let me ask you something. You're a man, right?" Maria was stunned. She looked down at her proud figure. Was this guy brain damaged or vision impaired? Lonan's eyes lingered on a certain part of Maria. "That can't be right. You don't look like a man. Maybe your father has an illegitimate child." As soon as he said this, Maria slapped him. Maria said, "Shut up. What nonsense are you talking?" But this slap made Lonan feel not pain, but an intense familiarity. Now he confirmed that this person was indeed Count Maria Sen from 10 years later. Before the time travel, Count Maria had been a supplier to the army. Noble in status, approachable in manner, often drinking with soldiers. And whenever Lonan discussed male-female matters with other soldiers, Maria would become unusually angry, followed by a slap. Lonan had been very curious and wanted to ask her why, but never had the chance until seeing Maria again. She had already died in the giant invasion war. But now, the mystery that had troubled Lonan for so long was finally revealed. The Count was a girl. This scene made Maria even angrier. "You're still laughing?" She rushed over to slap him again, but Lonan countered with a punch, saying, "Enough. I let you hit me once because I was wrong, but you have no reason to hit me a second time." Hearing this, Maria's eyes turned fierce. She headbutted Lonan and said, "What if I insist on hitting you a second time?" After saying this, the two started fighting, neither willing to yield. This scene left the two onlookers stunned. They quickly ran over to stop them. By evening, they gathered at a small inn. Asim was shocked to see the two people who had just wanted to kill each other, now sitting together calmly. It felt like they already knew each other well. Meanwhile, Lonan left 3 swords and a magic wand, which were seized from the goblins. He said, "See if there's any problem with these." Maria picked up a sword and examined it carefully. She said, "3 swords and a wand. Isn't it troublesome to carry them all?" Lonan said, "No choice. I carry them just in case." Because in his previous life, Lonan's swordsmanship was extremely brutal. He would break a sword almost every week. Lonan asked, "How are these things?" Maria thought for a moment and said, "They're all pretty good, especially this black iron sword. The material is exceptionally sturdy." Then Maria looked at the wand and found it had a rare magic stone. She said to Assam, "Is this little cutie a rare magician? What magic do you use, little cutie?" Assam was delighted to hear this. She said, "Yes, yes," but then she lowered her head and said, "I only know telekinesis." Maria reacted intensely. "Telekinesis? You're amazing. If you do well, you could get a full scholarship." Assam incredulously asked, "Really?" Then Maria changed the subject. "So the next question is, what combat techniques can you demonstrate in the practical exam?" Lonan was stunned. Could techniques be demonstrated? He had never heard of this. To enter Philip's Royal Academy, you must pass both theoretical and practical exams. The practical exam requires you to demonstrate combat techniques and impress the professors. Most nobles showcase their family's secret techniques, while ordinary warriors display magic. After hearing this, Lonan immediately stopped Maria. "Wait, I'm a swordsman. Shouldn't it be enough to just be good at swordsmanship? Can swordsmen use magic too?" Maria was stunned and said, "Every student wanting to enter Philip's must use magic. That's the most basic requirement." "What's with that expression? Don't tell me you can't even sense a bit of magical energy?" Lonan was confused. Sensing magical energy? Was it similar to using aura? This completely stunned Maria. This guy was like an illiterate trying to get into a top university. "Dreaming. Get out now," she said. Then she casually picked up a sword from the table and said, "Let me borrow your sword." Lonan asked, "What if it breaks?" Maria replied, "I'll compensate you triple. Stop arguing. Come outside with me. I'll give you special training." Magical energy is the root of natural power, existing in every corner of the world. But you must be able to sense magical energy to use it, and apply it to different parts of the body. The resulting power is called magic. It usually takes a year to comprehend. But Lonan still didn't understand. He asked, "Isn't aura also composed of magical power?" Maria said, "No, aura is more powerful than magical power. Even geniuses need at least 10 years to master it. And once activated, you gain power more terrifying than magic. That's the difference." That's enough explanation. After speaking, Maria rushed to Lonan's front, so fast. "Is this magic? The degree of strength amplification is so high." But Lonan's body instinctively parried the attack. Then with a little force, he pushed Maria away. Maria was also stunned. She had infused all her magical power into the sword. Why was she repelled? Who was this guy? Soon they exchanged a few more sword strikes. Now Lonan didn't want to continue fighting. His arms were aching from the impacts. He simply acted activated his aura and swung down, deliberately missing. Maria took the opportunity to create distance and said, "You really are something." Lonan turned back and said, "So are you, but you need to practice your body balance more." As he spoke, he sheathed his sword and was about to walk away. Maria asked, "Where are you going?" Maria wasn't satisfied. She raised her sword and said, "You don't really think you won, do you?" Lonan said calmly, "Remember what you said. Triple compensation if damaged." The next second, Maria's sword shattered completely. When did that happen? At this point, Assam, who was acting as referee, came over and touched her. Her expression suggested she wasn't surprised at all by the battle's outcome. She said, "You did well enough." After saying this, she quickly ran to Lonan, leaving a confused Maria behind. Maria was still wondering what exactly is he the next day. Lonan not only received enough gold coins to buy 3 swords, but also 2 bags full of books. Lonan asked, "What's all this?" Maria said, "The exam is in a month. Don't you need these?" Lonan asked, "But why are you doing this? Merchants are usually profit-driven." Then he drew his sword and said, "If you're trying to kill me." Maria laughed loudly. "Free. Completely free. I just hope we all pass the test." So Lonan sheathed his sword and said, "All right then, I'll accept." After a while, Maria said goodbye to Lonan. "After helping you two so much, if you don't pass, I'll kill you." Lonan smiled and said, "Of course. You should worry about yourself. See you in the capital on exam day." After saying goodbye, Lonan looked down at his hand. In the coming month, he would have to strengthen his physical training, because this body was currently too weak. Soon after, Lonan returned home. From then on, he ate 8 bowls of rice at each meal, only stopping when his stomach was completely full. This delighted his sister. Her brother had finally come to his senses, and at night, Lonan would go near the village to fight monsters. In his spare time, he studied the materials. Lonan was quite troubled. Why do I need to learn table manners for the exam? Despite saying this, he still read through all the materials Maria had given him. And so, a month quickly passed. Lonan and Assam arrived at Phillips for the gathering, seeing the magnificent academy that looked like a palace. Assam was amazed. She stared at it without blinking, her mouth full of praise. Lonan said, "Assam, what are you doing? Are you showing off your country bumpkin status?" Assam said, "I'm sorry, Lonan." Assam looked at Lonan and was stunned. In this 1 month, he seemed to have grown stronger, but Lonan just punched her, saying, "Stop spacing out, let's go." At this time, he should also be here, and his age should be about the same as mine. Sword Saint Shulafin, the person honored as the strongest swordsman. Perhaps I'll meet him during the test. At that moment, Assam suddenly mentioned the bluebird. Lonan then took out the feather, which could locate the bluebird's position, but unexpectedly, it pointed straight up to the sky, leaving Lonan stunned. But he quickly identified the rooftop of the tallest school building. Meanwhile, on the other side, Marin was about to open the window for some fresh air. Suddenly, a face appeared in front of him. He was immediately scared, because he was on the 30th floor at the very top. As Lonan and his companion burst in, Marin trembled while holding the blue bird. He said, "What do you want? Don't even think about harming the blue bird." Only when Lonan took out the feather did Marin's anxious heart finally ease. He asked, "Are you the heroes who save it?" After learning the truth, Marin quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry for embarrassing myself in front of you both." Lonan said, "It's fine. If someone needs to take the blame, it's all this one's fault. She used telepathy to send us up here." While being pinched, Assam protested, "You're the one who told me to teleport us up here." Surprisingly, the bird's owner turned out to be a lion man and a professor at Phillips Academy. After hearing this, Marin awkwardly said, "I didn't expect our heroes to be new students. Had I known earlier, I could have written you a recommendation letter, but it's too late now. If you fail, I could." Lonan interrupted him, saying, "That's nice, but that's not why we're here." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the bird dropping. Marin asked, "What is this?" Lonan said, "This is what your bluebird left in my hand." Marin took the dropping and began examining it, his expression growing increasingly tense. Lonan said, "Isn't it just an ordinary bird dropping? Why that expression?" Marin said, "It's a legendary dream bird. This is its egg, not an ordinary egg. If it absorbs fire attribute magic, it might hatch into an immortal phoenix. If placed in a monster's nest, it might manifest in the form of that monster." Marin continued with a horrified expression, "And now I can see countless types of magic power within this egg. Different magical energies intertwining and chasing each other." After listening, Lonan was stunned. As expected of a professor, he could assign so many meanings to an egg. Meanwhile, Marin's expression grew serious, and he said, "This egg should be left in your care, although extremely precious and it can only lay one in its lifetime. It chose to lay it in your hands, and we should respect that." The blue bird, hearing this, danced with joy, as if agreeing with Marin's words. Lonan took back the egg and said, "I have no objections. I also want to know what's inside." Then Lonan stood up to leave, but was stopped by Marin. The blue bird was chirping, seemingly reminding them of something. A moment later, Marin took out a scroll and said, "This is for you. It will help you with hatching." Time quickly moved to the beginning of the exam. Lonan complained to Maria, "We've waited so long and it's still not my turn." Maria replied, "Exams are always like this, but if our little cutie were here, it wouldn't be so boring." Lonan said, "She's a mage testing in another location." Just then, the examiner called Lonan's number. He got up to go. Maria said, "Don't be nervous. Do as I told you. If you don't pass, don't come back." Lonan waved his hand and said, "I know. Thanks for your blessing." Then he turned his head with a determined expression and said, "I'll be right back." Soon, Lonan arrived at the exam venue. Before him were 5 professors from Phillips Academy. In the middle was the principal, Archmage Clatil. Beside him was the sword instructor, Great Swordsman Nabiros. Just standing before them, Lonan felt an incomparable sense of pressure. He bowed to the professors. "Hello, my name is Lonan." The examiner said, "Hello, the dummy in front of you is your opponent today. Use any techniques you you have against it. Lonin said, I don't have any special techniques. I'll just demonstrate a quick sword drawing slash. I think that's enough for a dummy. The blonde professor laughed at this. He said to the professor next to him, wants to cut through the dummy's defense without magic power? What a fool. The white-haired professor agreed, a country bumpkin from some remote village, no wonder he doesn't know. This is a product of compact magical engineering, with amazing defense and regenerative abilities. Even the genius swordsman Shulafin couldn't leave a mark on it. Amid their mockery, Lonin assumed his stance. A pressure emanated from his body, almost instantly. Lonin completed his quick sword drawing slash. Lonin said, I've finished my demonstration, but this speed was nothing impressive to the professors. They almost wanted to laugh. Until a moment later, when 3 metallic impacts sounded, the principal was stunned, and nearby, Nibiru stood up immediately. With a flash, she rushed to Lonin's front. Aggressively, she placed her sword against his neck. She asked, your swordsmanship, who taught you? Confused, Lonin replied, what are you talking about? No one taught me. So Nibiru changed her question, did you see my movement just now? Lonin said, I saw it, you're impressive. In an extremely short time, you drew your sword and swung 3 times. Hearing this, Nibiru's emotion softened a bit. She said, yes, just like your demonstration. Then she changed her tone. You deliberately slowed down your 3rd strike so we could see it clearly, right? Lonin had slowed his 3rd strike to prevent self-injury, not to disrespect the professors. But facing the angry Nibiru, this explanation seemed completely unconvincing. The principal could only awkwardly avert his gaze, and these 2 other professors were dumbfounded. As professors, shouldn't we have seen something too? A moment later, Nibiru sheathed her sword and slowly walked back to her seat. She said, I will teach you personally in the future. Back in her seat, her emotions remained unsettled. The principal, observing the angry Nibiru, carefully recalled her words, teach personally. The principal understood she had already accepted Lonin as her disciple. He said to Lonin, you've passed. Why did you come to Philip's Royal Academy? Hearing this, Lonin lowered his head. Memories began to surface in his mind. Then he blurted out, to leave no regrets, but more accurately, it was to ensure his sister had no regrets. After answering, Lonin left the examination room. No regrets, huh? The principal smiled. That's quite troublesome. I don't even know how to teach him. The blonde professor asked, why such a big reaction from you all? What trick did that kid pull? The principal said, trick? No, more accurately, it should be called talent. Meanwhile, the dummy that Lonin had slashed suddenly split open. Then it fell to the ground. The 2 professors were stunned, because cutting through a dummy in one slash was an unattainable dream for every candidate. On the other side, Lonin stood blankly outside, recalling that sword-wielding lady. Even his past self wouldn't have had complete confidence in defeating her. So his choice to come to Philip's Royal Academy was correct. Here, he could definitely learn much knowledge unknown to him in his previous life. Then he walked toward the written test location. Next was the written exam. For someone who had read books for a whole month like himself, it should be easy. After the test, Lonin was dumbfounded. Could anyone actually solve these problems? On the other side, Maria was stunned seeing his expression. What was this guy doing? Didn't he read books for a whole month? How could he perform so poorly? Beside her, Assam hesitantly spoke up. You gave him 2 backpacks of books, one for warrior subjects, one for mage subjects. He seems to have taken the mage backpack. Maria was stunned. She said, what a foolish guy, not even knowing what he was reading. Just like that, who knows how much time passed? Maria pulled Lonin up and said, stop complaining. The practical exam weighs more. You'll be fine. Meanwhile, the test results came out quickly. Everyone eagerly stared, hoping to see their names appear. Assam passed, practical 12th, written 1st. Maria passed, practical 9th, written 9th. The 2 looked at each other upon receiving the results, then happily embraced, saying, we passed. Maria said, you're actually 1st in the written test, even though it's a 3-way tie. Little cutie, you're really amazing. Assam laughed foolishly. I was just lucky. Then Maria turned to ask Lonin, but the scene before her seemed wrong. Lonin, pale as death, said, my name isn't there. The 2 were shocked and said, that's impossible. Open your eyes wider and look again. Just then, an explosion sounded from behind. A phoenix manifested. It let out a long laugh and shot a fireball. It flew straight towards Lonin. After the explosion, several large words appeared before Lonin. Lonin, practical 1st, written 5712. So that means, we all passed, that's great. But Lonin quickly realized something terrifying. If he was 1st, it meant that person ranked behind him. That wasn't good. Lonin immediately felt a cold murderous intent from behind, and slowly approaching from behind was none other than Sword Saint Shulafin. He absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to surpass him in swordsmanship. He asked, are you the 1st? But Lonin didn't want to cause trouble. He said, I don't know. Shulafin said, stop pretending. Lonin spread his hands and said, am I 1st just because you say so? Do you have any evidence? Hearing this, Shulafin gave a cold laugh, and with incredible speed swung his sword at Lonin, only to be blocked. Shulafin said, this is the evidence. If you weren't the 1st, you couldn't block my sword. Now, you need to prove your swordsmanship is superior to mine. Lonin was a bit angry. He thought he could fool him, but this guy hadn't changed a bit. Lonin said, then watch carefully. Lonin leaped backward to create distance, and swung his sword. Shulafin was surprised. How could one slash produce 3 sword energies? Then he raised his hand to block the attack, but the powerful force made Shulafin's fingers tremble uncontrollably. Lonin asked, how about that? Are you happy now? But unexpectedly, Shulafin attacked Lonin again, saying, today one of us must die. Lonin panicked and hurriedly urged him to calm down. But Shulafin's eyes grew increasingly fierce. His subsequent attacks became more and more violent. This was exactly why Lonin feared meeting him. This guy was too obsessed with swordsmanship. If this continued, he would likely use his aura storm. When aura collide with aura, it would be hard hard to resolve. With no other choice, Lonan turned and ran. Seeing this, Shulafin became angrier and said, "What are you doing? How can you turn your back on an enemy during battle?" But unexpectedly, Lonan ran behind Assam, using her as a shield. Shulafin didn't dare attack recklessly anymore. He said, "You coward, using a woman as a shield." Lonan smirked. Sure enough, this guy hadn't changed at all, still valuing the knight's code above life itself. Then Lonan brazenly threw a punch, directly breaking Shulafin's nose. He lost his fighting ability as a result. Seeing this, Lonan quickly called for Assam and Maria. Then they quickly fled, disappearing without a trace, leaving behind a stunned Shulafin. Just then, the security guards of Philip's Royal Academy rushed over at the commotion. Seeing the scene, one immediately panicked. How could anyone dare to hurt a royal family's young master? He immediately asked, "Please tell me what the criminal looked like. We'll capture him right away." Shulafin said, "Don't worry about it. Don't treat me as a young master. I'm here as a student. Also, we had a fair duel." After speaking, Shulafin dusted himself off and said, "You don't need to handle this. I'll deal with it myself." Then he lowered his head, only to discover a crack in his sword. This sword was made of the highest grade materials, incredibly hard. Then Shulafin smiled and said, "Interesting." The next day, Lonan and Assam went to the forest in the suburbs, because they wanted to find that legendary river. But Lonan searched the map for a long time without finding it. This exhausted Assam. But what concerned her more was yesterday's incident. Assam said, "Shulafin is the heir to the Grand Duke's family. Aren't you afraid of his revenge?" Lonan said, "He's a good person, just too obsessed with swordsmanship. He has his own beliefs and principles, never bullying the weak. He's a model nobleman. I bet he'll say we had a fair duel, otherwise we'd already be in prison." Assam nodded and said, "You're right." But Lonan stopped in his tracks because they had finally found it. The legendary Fernando Springs, known as the Magic Veins. Here, stones absorb magic to become gems. Weeds absorb magic to become herbs, because the magic concentration is unusually high. But Lonan didn't feel anything special. He was simply following Professor Marin's instructions to hatch the egg here, to let the egg absorb more magic and hatch into a stronger phantom beast. Suddenly, Assam vaguely sensed something unsettling. She said, "Lonan, why is it so quiet here? The professor said this place is full of magic. There should be countless animals nesting here." Reminded of this, Lonan also felt uneasy. Not only was it quiet, but there was also a strong stench in the air. Lonan smiled and said, "Looks like they arrived before us." The next second, 5 arrows shot at Lonan from the forest, and each arrow was infused with abundant magic. Fortunately, Lonan reacted quickly. In an instant, he used his sword to knock them down. Damn it. Lonan said, "Assam, find a rock to hide behind." Then he walked towards the direction of the attack. Lonan released his full aura and charged with explosive speed. 3,000 meters away were 5 members of Kalaporo. They analyzed. He cut down 5 magic-infused arrows with one slash. Who is he? The purple-haired man sensed trouble and quickly ordered his subordinates to scatter. He planned to ambush Lonan from all sides, but unexpectedly, to catch them all at once, Lonan began shouting, "Stop your attack! I am your ally!" The purple-haired man was stunned. Seeing they were still suspicious, Lonan continued, "I am Anut, the youngest hound of the Adama branch." Hearing this, they appeared, but the purple-haired man was still suspicious. Who is this guy, using the same title as me, Hound? Yet Lonan could clearly state their internal affairs, which made the group very conflicted. In fact, these were things Lonan had learned in his previous life from the giant hunting team. There was a person called Anut. His position in Kalaporo had reached the terrifying title of Wolf, even higher than the Hound rank, so he often boasted about his glorious deeds in the camp, especially their poaching swords. Lonan still remembered vividly. Lonan said, "If you don't believe me, why not call your wolf out to talk?" Lonan smirked and said, "Just because an idiot like you can't do it doesn't mean I can't." Hearing this, the purple-haired man flew into a rage. He grabbed Lonan, ready to kill him. But Lonan spread his hands, playing innocent. He said, "Someone like you, who's always ready to kill, won't end well." Fortunately, a subordinate held back the purple-haired man. The subordinate said, "If what he says is true, killing him would definitely lead to conflict with the Adama branch. We should let the wolf decide." And this noisy commotion also alerted the wolf nearby, who walked over saying, "Didn't I tell you to be quiet during the hunt?" The strong pressure frightened everyone into stillness. Only the purple-haired man walked towards the bald wolf and told him everything in detail. After listening, the bald man said, "This forest is our territory. What are you doing here?" Lonan smiled. He had finally lured him out. Lonan took advantage of their unpreparedness and with one slash killed the 4 of them. Then he charged towards the bald wolf. A flash of sword light. The bald wolf's head was separated from his body, but Lonan specifically spared the purple-haired man. Lonan said, "Didn't I tell you? You won't end well." A moment later, all the purple-haired man's fingers were severed. Intense pain swept through him. He immediately fell to his knees in agony, unable to stand. Seeing this, Lonan threw the map at him, saying, "Mark all your branch locations on the map and I'll spare you." The purple-haired man hesitated. Betraying comrades wouldn't end well either, but Lonan's terrifying appearance completely subdued him. He cried, I'll write it, okay?" Lonan looked at his immaculate black iron sword and said, "Use your fingers to write." Shortly after, the purple-haired man marked all locations and handed the map to Lonan. The purple-haired man said, "You promised me you'll spare me, right?" Lonan slowly put away the map, then quickly drew his sword, cutting the purple-haired man in half. He said, "Of course not," because not far away, there lay evidence of their crimes. Animals, both large and small, all brutally killed. Assam, seeing this, vomited her previous meal, but she still worried if Lonan's actions were too cruel. Lonan said, "They are all wanted criminals who deserve execution. We're doing a good deed." Having said that, Lonan lowered his head, and before him lay the blue bird's corpse, even it had died. died. How heartbroken Professor Marin would be. Just then, the bluebird egg in his pocket began to vibrate. Lonan quickly reached to take it out. It must want to see its mother one last time. But Assam suddenly became panic-stricken. There, Lonan, what is that thing? Assam trembled with fear. Lonan looked in the direction she pointed. The animal's blood was floating up into the air and gathering together. As the blood mass grew larger and larger, Lonan immediately placed his hand on his sword, assuming a fighting stance. Just then, the bluebird egg in his hand broke free on its own and slowly floated up into the air. The next second, all the blood began frantically spinning around the egg and was absorbed in large gulps. Even blood from a distance converged. Assam hid behind Lonan and said, "Maybe we should go back." Lonan stared at the egg and said, "I don't know what's inside, but it must be extraordinary." 2.5 minutes later, the bluebird egg seemed to have eaten its fill. Lonan stared at it blankly. The next second, a crack appeared on the eggshell, and this crack rapidly spread to other areas. Lonan was delighted. It was finally hatching. Let's open our eyes wide and get a good look at this extraordinary creature. But before Lonan could see clearly, he was struck by it. Lonan painfully covered his nose and said, "So fast, what was that?" And what appeared before them was a pitch-black strange creature. Lonan said, "This doesn't look like a bird at all." Asim said, "Could it be a D-dragon?" Lonan was dumbfounded hearing this. He said, "Assam, are you serious?" Assam said, "Yes, it matches the description I read in books." After a while, Lonan was confused again. He said, "Who did the blue bird mate with to produce this thing?" Lonan tried to reach out and touch it, and the little creature cooperated, nuzzling his finger. But thinking of how it had hurt his handsome face, Lonan angrily said, "Assam, we're having an extra dish tonight." The little creature was startled. Then it quickly used healing magic, rapidly healing all of Lonan's wounds, and flew over to nuzzle Lonan's face. Only then did he forgive it. This little one actually has healing abilities. How many more secrets does it have? Assam said, "Let's give it a name first." But just then, it seemed to sense something. Its face darkened. Suddenly it charged in one direction. It seems to have detected something. "Let's follow it quickly." And the little creature's target turned out to be a surviving member of the poaching gang. He had just gone to the bathroom. When he returned, his home was gone, and he had hidden nearby, witnessing the hatching process. He was terrified and fled immediately. But after running for so long, he was still caught by the incredibly fast little creature. The poacher was frightened. Tripped over a branch, the little creature immediately used its power to absorb the blood from his wounds. "Stop, Sita, you'll kill him." Lonan's voice suddenly rang out. Assam asked puzzledly, "Sita, is that the name you gave it?" Lonan said, "Yes. Do you like it?" Sita showed a happy expression. Then Lonan turned his gaze to the poacher and said, "Are you okay, Anut?" The poacher was so scared he fell to his knees, saying, "Thanks to you, I'm fine. But how do you know my name?" Lonan put his sword to his neck and said, "You don't need to know that, Mr. Talkative Poacher." So he was the one who boasted about his poaching in Lonan's previous life camp. Anut denied, No, I'm just a runner." Lonan said, "That's temporary, you'll climb to a higher position later." Then Lonan smiled and said, "I want you to help me with something." After little Sita hatched, Lonan returned to the imperial capital. But he also did one thing along the way, and it was this thing that made them rich. It turned out that the Fernando Springs water they collected had abundant and pure magic, so it was purchased at an astronomical price by Maria's father. Asim said, "Let's go thank Professor Marin." Lonan agreed, because he still needed to tell him about the blue bird's death. But the Professor Marin was on a business trip and wouldn't be back for a long time. With no choice, the two had to leave. On the way, Assam asked, "Lonan, what will you do with this money?" Lonan fell into contemplation. Since he was first in the practical exam, he had a full scholarship and didn't need to pay tuition. And the day after tomorrow was the enrollment ceremony, so there was no time to spend this money. So Lonan brought his sister Eli over. The sister from the countryside had never seen such a world, either amazed by the magnificent buildings or attracted by things she had never seen before. But what she cared about more was her brother. She said, "Why are you thinner again? Haven't you been eating properly?" And Lonan still patiently said he was doing well, asking her not to worry. Then Lonan eagerly took his sister's hand, saying, "Come on, I want to take you somewhere." Upon reaching the destination, his sister was stunned. She knew her brother had earned some money recently, but was it necessary to come to such a luxury store? Yet Lonan didn't mind the expense at all, repeatedly confirming with the clerk, "These can all be delivered to the house, right?" The clerk smiled broadly and said, "Of course," because this dress was already the 15th item Lonan had purchased. His sister couldn't believe that her once lazy brother was now so accomplished. Then she excitedly started running around. Lonan hurriedly urged her to calm down. Lonan said, "Let's go to the blacksmith shop. My sword was damaged by a bastard." Before he could finish, as soon as he pushed open the door, he saw Shulafin. Lonan was shocked and said, "Why are you here? Are you a stalker?" Shulafin explained, "I'm here to pick up my newly bought sword. My sword was damaged by you. You do know that, right?" Shulafin's eyes grew increasingly fierce, and Lonan retorted defiantly, "A stalker is a stalker. Don't make excuses." Lonan angrily drew his sword and said, "Let me show you what a damaged sword looks like." Shulafin also placed his hand on his sword. Just as tensions mounted between them, his sister stepped between them. Lonan said, "Sister, you've got it wrong. That guy over there is the bastard." But his sister scolded him, "Lonan, I've told you not to use foul language. How dare you talk back?" Then she turned around to apologize to Shulafin for her brother's rudeness. But this scene made Shulafin's heart race wildly, as if he had fallen into a gentle embrace. Shulafin took all the blame on himself and promised to take responsibility. Eli said, "Really? You're so kind." Eli held Shulafin's hand and said, "It's wonderful that Lonan has a friend like you. You'll take good care of Lonan, right?" Shulafin blushed and said, "Of course. I'll compensate him with a sword first." Shulafin touched his chest but found he hadn't brought about money. So he took out his family emblem and said, "This is the symbol of our family. You can use it anywhere. If you want to buy a sword, go to the blacksmith shop on Ruishi Street. They have 500 years of history. Commoners can't enter, but with this, you can go in. I hope they can forge a good sword for you." After speaking, Shulifin shakily left. Lonan was dumbfounded. Is this really the Shulifin I know? Does he realize what he's doing? This Granzia family emblem could buy an entire village. Not long after, the enrollment ceremony began on time. Principal Claytel spoke first. The enrollment ceremony now officially begins. Welcome, the talents of the 787th class. What followed was the principal's lengthy speech, making Lonan begin to yawn. But suddenly, the principal stopped his speech. He snapped his fingers. The next second, spatial rifts appeared in the air. In the blink of an eye, everyone present was transported to an arena amid everyone's shocked expressions. The principal just smiled and said, "Now, let's give senior and junior students a chance to get to know each other." The next second, the principal teleported them to the Coliseum. What was about to take place was a meet and greet between freshmen and sophomores. Rather than meeting and getting to know each other, it was more of a competition to determine superiority. The victors would receive more educational resources. On one side were freshman Lonan and Sword Saint Shulifin. On the other side were the top 4 warriors from last year. First place Nezduo, second place Barama, third place Karen, fourth place Alina. Each possessed remarkable strength, and each specialized in different fighting styles. Everyone anticipated this tense match. In this academy full of prodigies, who would claim the title of Academy Champion? The principal said, "This is a very meaningful duel. Not only can it determine winners and losers, but also helps understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. You can freely choose opponents, but this is unfair to the freshmen, so you can also forfeit. Forfeiting is not shameful." Hearing this, Lonan was furious. The principal was clearly looking down on the freshmen. Since things had developed to this point, why not use this opportunity to prove to his sister that he wouldn't be bullied at school? Lonan had a flash of inspiration. He waved his hand to stop the principal. He said, "May I make a suggestion? Since we can choose freely, why not have them all come at once?" Lonan's words stunned the older students. Their eyes filled with shock and a hint of anger. This was a first in the history of Philip's Academy, so the principal consulted with several professors. These two were at a loss. Only Nabiros strongly supported it. She also wanted to see what other cards Lonan had up his sleeve. She said, "If things get out of control, I'll intervene." Seeing Nabiros's confidence, the principal reluctantly agreed. The match continued. First round, Lonan versus the 4 sophomores. In the audience, his sister became anxious upon hearing this. She shouted to Lonan, "Be careful. If you sense danger, forfeit immediately." Lonan just smiled and waved, indicating his sister shouldn't worry. With the principal's command, the match began. Nazduo charged over at incredible speed. Lonan ducked to avoid. This guy's speed was obviously several times higher than Maria's back then. Then Alina also attacked with dual short daggers. Lonan blocked all her attacks. Taking advantage of Alina blocking Lonan's view, Karen thrust forward. Lonan, seeing he couldn't avoid it, quickly raised his sword to block, but the powerful force sent Lonan flying several meters. But more danger lay ahead, because behind Lonan, Barama had already raised his great sword. He said, "Don't say such things in your next life. I originally wanted to fight you fair and square." Barama swung his sword down with full force. This slash was both fast and fierce, and the other 3 were already prepared for follow-up attacks. Impressive, this level of coordination must have been practiced for at least 2.5 years. Even Lonan had to praise their teamwork. But in the blink of an eye, Lonan vanished from their sight, making them miss their target. What speed is this? Before Alina could be surprised, Lonan charged at them with extreme velocity. Then he began his attack, landing heavy blows on each of the 3, defeating them. Next came the duel between the strongest swordsman of 2 classes. Barama was eager. He immediately charged forward with his sword, but the moment Lonan swung his sword, he saw the shadow of Professor Nabiros in Lonan. His aura has already reached the professor's level, just as Barama was surprised. A flash of sword light. Lonan had completed his slash. By the time Barama regained his senses, his great sword had already been shattered by Lonan. Lonan just smiled. His eyes provocatively glanced at the professors. After Lonan's victory, the venue was silent for a few seconds, then erupted in thunderous applause. No one had expected this outcome. A freshman had defeated the top 4 seniors. Hearing the loud cheers, the defeated 4 stood motionless. Nazduo looked at his broken sword, accepting that he and Lonan were not on the same level. Barama fell to his knees in despair, but Lonan just wanted to prove to his sister that he wouldn't be bullied at the academy. Then he fixed his gaze on his sister. His sister was excitedly grabbing a stranger's collar, saying, "Did you see that? That's my brother." Lonan on the stage thought for a moment and decided to just act it out. He slowly walked to the front of the 4, politely placing his hand on his chest, even bowing to 90 degrees. He said, "Thank you for accepting my challenge. I learned a lot today." This scene left Assam completely stunned. What was Lonan doing? Had he eaten something bad? The 4 also looked at each other in bewilderment, surprised that this powerful guy was so polite. Barama excitedly jumped up, then grabbed Lonan's hand and said, "You don't need to be so modest." Then he raised Lonan's hand and declared, "You are the victor." And the scene of the 2 chatting and laughing made her sister believe that Lonan had grown up. He could even get along well with his senior now. Below the stage, a purple-haired girl was watching this scene. She slightly curved her lips and said, "He really is an interesting boy." Time quickly moved to the evening. The academy had prepared a banquet for the new students. The scene before her left Assam stunned. Just a banquet could be so luxurious. Maria just smiled after hearing this, because such occasions were too common for her. Then she began eating meat in large mouthfuls mouthfuls. Assam then asked Lonan, "Did you send your sister off?" Lonan said, "Yes. Before she left, she reminded me to eat properly and not fight with classmates. It took me a long time to reassure her. For her safety, I even sent Sita to protect her." After hearing this, Assam said with delight, "You really are a caring brother." After explaining all this, Lonan picked up a chicken leg and was about to put it in his mouth. But unexpectedly, Shulafin appeared behind him. He said, "Can you really eat at ease now, Lonan?" Shulafin's appearance startled Lonan. Lonan immediately asked angrily, "What are you up to this time?" Shulafin said, "Nothing much, just something very important." Lonan looked puzzled. What important matters could this wealthy young master possibly have? Shulafin nodded. Then he took out a small notebook and asked, "Where does Miss Eli live? Is it far from here?" Lonan felt speechless. And Shulafin continued asking, "How are the road conditions back home? Are the security measures good?" This series of questions left Lonan's mind spinning. He said, "Is this what you called important?" Shulafin said seriously, "You should have arranged personal maids and mercenaries to protect her, right? Or did you do nothing at all? That would be terrible." Lonan angrily retorted, "I sent a flying dragon to protect her. A flying dragon is stronger than any mercenary." But this answer made Shulafin uneasy. "Won't the dragon hurt Miss Eli?" Lonan said, "She's my sister. What does it have to do with you? Who do you think you are to her?" This question directly stumped Shulafin. Just at this awkward moment, a purple-haired girl came over. She said, "What an interesting scene. The young master of Grancia is actually so talkative." Hearing this voice, Shulafin asked disdainfully, "Why are you here looking for me?" The girl before them was Elizabeth Akalucia, ranked first among the new magic students. She smiled and said, "Don't misunderstand, I'm not looking for you, but for Lonan." Shulafin breathed a sigh of relief. He said, "I've said what I wanted to say. You can go find whoever you want," and prepared to leave. But after a few steps, he stopped and said, "I think I should send some Grancia guards to protect her." But Lonan told him to disappear quickly after hearing this. A moment later, Assam tugged at Lonan's clothes, looking nervously at Akalucia. She said, "That person, she's very strong. But even facing opponents who have lost their fighting ability, she still shows no mercy. I don't agree with that approach." Akalucia innocently said, "That was just giving them a small lesson." Then Akalucia immediately changed her demeanor. She reached into her chest, took out a purple brooch, and handed it to Lonan. Lonan took it. He stared blankly at the token in his hand. In his previous life, someone had also given him such a brooch, inviting him to join. That was the Grand Commander Andershan Akalucia. Elizabeth confidently told Lonan, "With your strength, passing the Patriarch's trial would be easy." Elizabeth said, "I believe you know what this means, and I believe you'll make a wise choice." Then she turned to leave. But she turned her head back and said, "A wolf that stays in a sheep pen too long will also become a sheep." After that, she left with several followers. Assam's anxious heart finally calmed down. Although Lonan had no intention of joining, he was interested in the Akalucia family's mysterious castle, because there might be clues about the giants there. Time quickly arrived at the first day of school. Different entrance exam scores resulted in vastly different treatment. Students with mid-range scores lived in the Intidia Hall, enjoying single rooms and a self-service cafeteria, while the bottom 30% were all crowded into a small wooden house. Among them were some noble young masters. They usually demanded single rooms and servants, but the teachers would patiently explain to them, "None of these are available, and if you want to bathe, there are shared bathrooms in the hall. If you don't study hard, you will still live here next semester," the teacher said before leaving only the noble young masters looking at each other. Meanwhile, the elite top 10%, including Lonan, they lived in the Nabado's hall. It was simply magnificent and splendid. Even Lonan was stunned. He could imagine Asam's jaw dropping at seeing such arrangements. At this moment, the documents on the table caught his attention. They were course introductions and application forms. The elite students had the right to choose their own courses, but for someone illiterate like Lonan, he was very curious about every course here. However, he had heard that first-year students shouldn't choose too many courses, which left him conflicted. In the end, curiosity won over everything. Never mind, he selected all the fun ones. After filling out the form, Lonan looked at the application on the table with satisfaction. He had chosen almost 2/3 of all courses. He said, "Since I'm a genius, I should do as I please." But he soon regretted it. Shortly after starting the basic swordsmanship class, the teacher stared at him seriously and said, "Student Lonan, you can graduate now." Lonan asked in confusion, "But we've just started." The teacher said, "Student, that's exactly what I wanted to say. You've just started, and you've already perfectly demonstrated all the sword techniques. If I let you stay, other students would doubt their own abilities." After saying this, the teacher gave him his first compliment of the day, followed by the archery teacher's second compliment, and the hunting teacher's third compliment. This drove Lonan crazy as they all kicked him out. With no choice, Lonan could only sit by the river questioning his life. But a voice sounded from behind, "Student, shouldn't you be in class?" It was Professor Nabiros from the academy. "I see you've already completed all the courses, right?" Lonan said, "Are all courses only at this level? It's far from what I imagined." Nabiros knew he was outstanding, but completing courses on the first day was still difficult. Then Nabiros put down her sword and said, "Since the courses can no longer satisfy you, let me give you a proper lesson." She asked Lonan to hand over his sword. Just as Lonan was confused, a sword beam full of magical power swept past him and caused a sizable explosion at its endpoint. Before Lonan could be surprised, Nabiros said, "This is the limit of your broken sword. Even consuming a large amount of magic power, it only achieved this level. This can hardly be called a weapon." Then Nabiros slowly extended her hand to grip her own sword, quickly moving forward with a slash. The same posture, the same sword technique. Yet it unleashed power tens of times stronger than before. This absolutely amazed Lonen. The splashing water even caused a heavy rainstorm around them. Looking at the shocked Lonen, Nabiros smiled and said, "Now you know what you're lacking, right?" With the same sword technique and the same force, Lonen couldn't understand why there was such a difference. Nabiros explained, "You need a good weapon now, and learn how to use magic power." But Nabiros was puzzled how he could demonstrate such impressive strength without a good weapon or magic power. While Lonen was still lowering his head, immersed in the shocking sword technique he had just witnessed, Nabiros said, "Here's the deal, Lonen. Come to my class." Lonen was surprised and said, "Can I? You're a second-year teacher, and I'm just a first year." Nabiros turned around and said, "My permission is enough. And my condition is, don't bring that broken sword." Time flew to the academy's first holiday. Lonen told everyone about Nabiros. Then he went to the Ruishi Street. Stopping in front of the Granzia royal family's blacksmith shop, he planned to buy a good sword. Asam said, "Is this really a noble family's blacksmith? It looks like a slight breeze could blow it down." Lonen grimaced and said, "Let's take a look inside. Though it looks broken on the outside, maybe it's even more broken inside." Lonen was dumbfounded. There was dust and cobwebs everywhere, nothing that resembled royalty at all. But Shulafin had never lied before. Just as Lonen was confused, a giant paw suddenly reached out from inside the door. "Who's disturbing my sleep?" Then a werewolf appeared. He sized everyone up with unfriendly eyes and said, "What are you doing here?" Asam was instantly terrified, and Lonen was also a bit surprised. The blacksmith was actually a werewolf. Seeing that no one spoke, the werewolf said more fiercely, "Are you all deaf?" Lonen then took out the badge Shulafin had given him and explained that he was here to buy a sword. The werewolf took a look and said, "This is the Granzia family badge, but you people are not from the Granzia family, especially the one with pink hair. Can't see a single noble trait in you." The werewolf said, "You're not from the Granzia family. We only serve Granzia family members." After saying this, he yawned and prepared to go back to sleep, but suddenly he stopped, then looked greedily at Assam and said, "Or I can offer a condition. Let me take a bite of this soft fellow's arm, and perhaps I'll agree to sell you a sword." Assam was instantly terrified, and before Lonen could agree, the werewolf began approaching Assam step by step, completely unaware that Lonen's eyes were already filled with killing intent. "Are you seeking death?" Lonen thrust his sword at the werewolf, directly sending him flying several meters, but the feeling in his hand was strange, as if being bounced off by something. Looking up, the werewolf had somehow put on armor. Although it blocked the sword strike, the powerful force still broke the werewolf's ribs. Invisible armor. "Well, then I'll just break it apart." The werewolf was terrified after hearing this and hurriedly explained, "This was just a test, testing your strength and my armor's durability, so I deliberately provoked you." Lonen obviously didn't believe this excuse. Lonen said, "You came up with that excuse pretty quickly." Seeing this, the werewolf continued to beg for mercy, saying he wanted to confront Shulafin in person, which saved him. Lonen spared him not because he believed his words, but because he didn't want to see Shulafin. Then Lonen put away his sword. The werewolf also smiled and apologized to Assam, saying, "Actually, I don't eat humans. I'm Diddy Khan, the apprentice here. Come in, I'll take you to our forge." Then the werewolf led everyone inside and pressed a hidden switch. The moment it was pressed, the ground shook violently, then quickly descended. It turned out there was a hidden space inside, and the real forge, Cappadocia, was within it, the Empire's largest forge. The werewolf smiled at Lonen and said, "Since you've passed my test, your weapon is in my hands." Under the werewolf's guidance, they came to this 400-year-old blacksmith shop, Cappadocia. Seeing Lonen's outstanding talent, the werewolf decided to take him to find the old dwarf Dolan to forge a sword. Rumor had it that he was an old blacksmith with over 400 years of experience. Many of the Empire's famous swords were made by him. The werewolf proudly introduced to everyone. Soon they arrived at the door. The werewolf said, "For such a senior, I also respect him greatly." After saying this, the werewolf kicked the door open hard. Lonen was stunned. Where was the respect he promised? Then the werewolf strode in without care and said, "Old man, I brought customers." But the old blacksmith's face was already filled with killing intent. "Diddy Khan, you can't come in without making a scene, can you? I need quiet when I work." The werewolf proudly announced that he had brought a genius customer. Hearing this, the blacksmith immediately became interested. He stopped his work and walked over. The werewolf said, "It's him. His swordsmanship will definitely surprise you." But looking at Lonen's young face, the blacksmith obviously didn't believe it. So he suggested Lonen demonstrate, and Lonen agreed. But as soon as he drew his black iron sword, the old man snatched it away, stared at Lonen's sword in silence for a few seconds, then smashed the sword with a hammer. Lonen's face darkened. This was the most perfect sword he had chosen from hundreds. Lonen angrily said, "You old fool, do you know what you're doing?" The old man casually pointed in a direction and said, "With such a broken sword for demonstration, I can't judge your level. The swords here are thousands of times better than yours. Pick any one you like, and I'll give it to you." Lonen was surprised after hearing this. Then he picked up a sword he liked, but just as he picked it up, he immediately felt different from before. However, he wasn't sure if the sword technique's power would have such a big difference. After confirming with the old man that he didn't need to compensate for damaged items, Lonen gently wielded the mithril sword, making the posture of using a sword technique. He wanted to use Nabiros's move, though without infusing magic power, the power might not be as great. But as Lonen delivered the slash, the distant furnace actually exploded on the spot, and the destructive power along its path far exceeded Lonen's imagination. Lonen Lonan was stunned. He said, "This wasn't my intention, do you believe me?" The old man sighed helplessly. After all, he had said there was no need for compensation. But what surprised the old man was that this young man before him was actually using Nabiros's sword technique. He asked Lonan if he was her disciple. Lonan was surprised and said, "You know her too?" The old man nodded, and his next words shocked Lonan even more. It turned out that Nabiros's sword, the secret sword Ulusa, was one of the old man's few outstanding works. He told Lonan, "The quality difference in swords can sometimes even affect one's judgment of their own abilities." After saying this, the old man patted Lonan's back and said, "I haven't seen a genius like you for many years. But having too much talent is also a problem. It means you'll have difficulty finding a suitable weapon. First, the material for forging weapons is an issue. Even this mithril sword can't withstand your power, so we must add harder forging materials to assist in the forging." So Lonan took something out of his pocket. It was the shell of the blue bird egg, which Lonan had been reluctant to throw away. The old man took the eggshell and began hammering it. But the eggshell showed no signs of cracking. The old man's eyes lit up. He said, "This is absolutely the perfect material for making a good sword. May I use it?" Lonan nodded, as the eggshell was no longer useful to him. "Come back in 2 weeks. I'll prepare the best sword in the Empire for you." Lonan smiled with satisfaction, then called Maria and Assam to leave, but was stopped by the old man. He said, "I can't let our distinguished guests leave empty-handed. You two go find other masters. Mention my name and they will treat you well." The old man spoke while frantically hammering the eggshell. He said, "What a wonderful sound." This scene left all three dumbfounded, unanimously thinking the old man was crazy. This day, in a deeper underground level below Cappadocia, there were two strangely dressed people. They were actually plotting how to destroy Cappadocia. Lonan's sword would be completed and delivered in 2 weeks. It was said that it would be the Empire's most outstanding sword. Maria and Assam had also ordered their weapons, which would be expensive. But they didn't mind, and even wanted to buy more, because the person paying was Shulafin. During these 2 weeks, Lonan could only wander aimlessly around the academy out of boredom. But as he walked, he stopped, because the luxurious sailboat building in front of him caught his attention. He vaguely remembered that Nabiros's teaching location was also here. She told Lonan to come to class only after getting a proper weapon, so Lonan planned to wait until he got his new sword. But just then, Nabiros was already standing beside him with a murderous look. Lonan turned his head and said, "Good evening, Professor Nabiros." But Nabiros immediately grabbed Lonan's ear. She said, "Long time no see. Didn't I tell you to come to my class as soon as you got a weapon?" Lonan wanted to make excuses, but Nabiros didn't give him a chance. She dragged him toward the classroom, saying, "I'll listen to your excuses on the way." Lonan said, "Can you let go first?" It hurts, and their commotion also caught the attention of a long-haired girl who stopped to watch. Little did she know that the guy behind her already had bad intentions. He deliberately bumped into the girl and said, "Don't block the way, walk faster." The girl was confused and lowered her head to apologize, but he became even more aggressive. He said, "You walk as slow as a turtle. If you have time, go practice your lessons more. Understand?" The girl didn't want to cause trouble, so she swallowed her anger, because she originally had no chance to enroll here. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lonan and Nabiros had arrived at the practice room. Nabiros said, "You all know him, right? The new student who shone in the competition. His name is Lonan, and he'll be attending class with you." Lonan bowed and said, "I'm Lonan, a freshman in the Department of Warriors. Nice to meet you all." People below started whispering, "Is he really that strong? He looks quite weak." Lonan heard all of this. But fortunately, not everyone was malicious. There were still two familiar friendly faces. Looking to the other side, that guy Shulafin was also here. Just as everyone was about to start practicing, a girl pushed open the door and entered. She said, "I'm very sorry, teacher, I'm late." After hearing her voice, a sense of familiarity arose in Lonan. Nabiros didn't mind and said, "Take a good rest first. We just introduced a new student. Go and say hello to him." Then the girl walked over. She said, "Nice to meet you, Lonan. I'm the teaching assistant for the second-year class, Andershan." Lonan didn't expect to meet her again in this way. Andershan Akalusia. During the giant invasion, she had unparalleled command ability. She was the Empire's first female commander, known to the world as the Iron Lady. Who could have imagined she also had such a gentle side? But judging from the current situation, she had no memories of her previous life. Should I tell her about her request from that time? But how to explain it? Lonan fell into a dilemma as he looked at Andershan, and she was always busy. This person said, "Look, is my posture correct?" That person said, "The towel here has a strange smell." She could only deal with them one after another. The great commander comrade was actually doing these small tasks. At this time, the guy who had deliberately given Andershan a hard time walked over and said, "How about a duel with me?" Seeing Lonan's confusion, he explained, "I'm Kalden from the 3rd year. I heard you performed brilliantly in the competition, and I want to learn from you." But Lonan wasn't interested and politely declined. Yet he persisted and said, "Oh, I seem to have forgotten to bring a weapon." He shouted at Andershan, "Hey, loser, bring me my practice spear." And Andershan hurriedly went to get it. Lonan's face had already darkened. Loser? Does this bastard know who he's talking about? Soon Andershan brought over his spear, but Kalden deliberately found fault again. He said, "You idiot. I've already switched to a short spear, don't you know?" Then he used the long spear to hit Andershan hard on the head. He said, "You got into this school by begging the instructors. Is it too much to ask you to do these things?" Just at that moment, Lonan grabbed his spear. Looking at him with murderous intent, he said, "I accept. Let's duel." But Kalden started to mock the two. "Didn't you not want to duel? Is it for this loser? Are you two commoners showing affection for each other?" Before he could finish, Lonan threw the spear to him, then lightly pointed with his sword. Kaldan was sent flying with a grim expression, and the long spear in his hand broke into 2 pieces. Lonen said, "Isn't this the short spear you wanted? Do you like it?" Kaldan became furious. He was a noble that a commoner like him couldn't aspire to. How dare he humiliate him like this? Then he went all out and thrust with the short spear. Lonen just waited in place until the short spear was about to hit him before acting. With just a casual swing of his sword, the opponent's short spear broke into 3 pieces. Lonen said, "Yes, I dare to humiliate you." Kaldan was stunned, but there was more to come. 1 slash, 2 slashes, 3 slashes, each with the force of 1,000 pounds, directly causing Kaldan to lose consciousness. Then, Lonen was still not satisfied with his anger. Said, "Fortunately, this was inside the academy. If this were outside, you would really die." Those watching the battle nearby were shocked. Kaldan had actually lost? He was a top-ranked student in the higher grades. Then Lonen walked towards these people. Because these guys had also treated the Grand Commander like a servant, so Lonen didn't plan to let them off either. Lonen said, "Next is that impolite bastard with the towel. If you smell, can't you wash it yourself?" Lonen angrily walked over and said, "Is the teaching assistant your servant?" This scene directly frightened the girl. Fortunately, Andershan stepped in to stop him, then stood in front of Lonen. Andershan didn't understand why someone she had just met would make such a big fuss for a commoner like her. Lonen said, "Anyone can be humiliated, even me, but except you." Then, Lonen recalled the Grand Commander's contributions during the giant invasion in his previous life. He said, "At least in this empire no one can disrespect you," and then gently pushed Andershan aside. Just then, Nabiros's voice sounded, "Stop, Lonen." Along with it came a terrifying pressure, immediately making Lonen freeze in place. It wasn't that he didn't want to move, but his body wouldn't obey. It was a kind of fear generated from deep within, like being firmly locked by the gaze of a 2.5-meter-long snake. Then Nabiros looked at Lonen sternly and said, "I can overlook the matter with Kaldan, but you must stop now." Lonen was very dissatisfied with Nabiros's inaction. He tried hard, struggling to make his body move. Nabiros stared at Lonen and said, "I warn you one last time, will you stop or not?" Lonen still showed no sign of backing down. Nabiros felt helpless. She would have to subdue this guy first. As the great snake opened its bloody mouth, Lonen felt a violent impact on the back of his head. When he opened his eyes, he saw the Grand Commander Andershan from his previous life. She accepted the frontline command work without hesitation. Although she knew that people on the frontline were doomed to die, she was still willing to devote herself to the Empire. With another blink, the scene around changed. It was the final moment when the 8-winged giant appeared. Andershan smiled and told Lonen, "Please don't forgive me, because I selfishly entrusted the task of protecting the Empire to you." Lonen urgently called out the Grand Commander's name, but unexpectedly this was a dream. But turning his head, Andershan really appeared before him. She looked at him anxiously. Lonen said, "Are you all right, Grand Commander?" Andershan said, "What Grand Commander? What are you talking about?" Lonen then realized that Andershan had no memories of her previous life. He could only smile foolishly. Andershan said, "Did you get so angry because of me?" Lonen blushed after hearing this and said, "No, I'm a very elegant gentleman. I've always disliked their behavior since I was young." But Andershan could see at a glance that Lonen was lying. She said, "Actually, you don't need to hate them, including Kaldan. This is my own doing." Lonen said somewhat angrily, "I can't let them treat you like this, including Professor Nabiros. You're dedicated to this job, yet she watches you being bullied and does nothing." Andershan smiled bitterly. "Professor Nabiros is a good person. She doesn't intervene because I asked her not to. To take this course, one must be a sword prodigy. And my swordsmanship hasn't made a breakthrough for a year, and I've only just grasped magic power. She gave me this opportunity. I not only don't resent her, but I'm grateful to her." Lonen was surprised after hearing this. In his previous life, Andershan had an incredibly strong presence. Did she also have times when she hit bottlenecks? She said, "I can handle these small matters, but thank you anyway, Lonen. I'm already used to most of it. But being hit is quite painful." Lonen was silent for a few seconds after hearing this. He said, "Perhaps this is why you could go so far, eventually becoming the Grand Commander." Andershan was surprised after hearing this. She said, "How did you know that's my dream? Although it's difficult, I will definitely work hard." Lonen was stunned after hearing this, and Andershan thought she had spoken too casually, hurriedly explaining to Lonen, "Although this dream may be unrealistic, I definitely won't give up." As she spoke, Andershan looked at her own palm. These injuries were all left from practicing swordsmanship, but her words had already put Lonen in a dilemma. On one side was Andershan's last will from his previous life. Back then, she told Lonen to tell her current self not to struggle anymore for becoming the Grand Commander. Just be a tailor and live an honest life. Meanwhile, Lonen couldn't bear to discourage the confident Andershan. Even after Andershan left, Lonen remained silent. He didn't know what he should do, but it seemed that no matter what he did, it would be wrong. After returning home, Dolan sent a pigeon at midnight, telling Lonen to go to Cappadocia to retrieve his sword. But when they arrived at the forge, there wasn't even someone to receive them. Lonen was a bit angry, so he kicked a helmet on the ground, sending it flying. Maria said he definitely had something on his mind, and Lonen didn't plan to wait any longer. He decided to go in himself. After fumbling around, he actually found the elevator switch. With a shaking around them, the elevator began to descend. But as soon as they arrived, Lonen was stunned, because Cappadocia was engulfed in raging flames, and many blacksmiths lay fallen on the ground. After Assam's reminder, Lonen immediately spotted the culprit. It was a stone man standing 2.5 meters tall, and he was still chasing a group of blacksmiths. After thinking for a moment, Lonen grabbed Assam, then told Maria to go back to the academy for reinforcements. Afterward, Lonan leaped down, while Assam used telepathy to control their descent. Meanwhile, the blacksmiths finally had no strength left to run. Seeing this, the stone man immediately raised both fists, ready to crush them. At this critical moment, Lonan's slash directly destroyed the stone man's arm. Coincidentally, his recent troubles had been bothering him, so he'd take out his frustrations on this fellow. The stone man counterattacked with his remaining arm, but just as it was about to hit, Lonan simply vanished on the spot. He had activated his energy field. In the blink of an eye, he appeared on the stone man's shoulder, followed by a clean, decisive slash. The stone man's proud armor was like paper, instantly crumbling away. Seeing this, the rescued blacksmith's eyes widened like eggs. Then Lonan stepped on it. He asked the old man what had happened here. From them he learned that not long ago, dozens of stone men had suddenly emerged from underground. They started smashing things without a word. Nothing was spared. Even worse, they had taken some blacksmiths captive. Dolong, who was forging Lonan's sword, was among them, but Didikon had gone to rescue them, although he was skilled at forging, not fighting. After hearing this, Lonan sensed the situation was dire. He immediately ordered Assam and Sita to stay and help the wounded. Assam asked, "Then what are you going to do?" Lonan turned toward the direction the stone men had retreated. He was definitely going to rescue Dolong, because the sword was still with him. Deep underground, Dolong clutched the sword tightly, saying, "I'm grateful you came to save me, but you really didn't need to come." The one standing in front of him was Didikon, who was already severely wounded, yet still shielding the old man from the stone men. He said, "Stop talking nonsense and run." But the old man just stood there saying, "Your invisible armor probably won't work against him." Didikon was furious. He said, "At a time like this, you're still saying such disheartening things to discourage me? If you think you can do better, go ahead with that sword in your hand." But hearing this, the old man hugged the sword even tighter. "No, I can't insult it with my terrible swordsmanship." As he spoke, he even started to worship it. Didikon was speechless. This crazy old man obsessed with weapons will get me killed sooner or later. At that moment, the stone man decided not to listen to their conversation any longer. He raised his fist and smashed down forcefully. But this strike was actually blocked by Didikon, though it severely injured him, even breaking his invisible armor. Just as Didikon was about to die heroically, a red flash arrived at an incredible speed, followed by countless slashes. The stone man instantly collapsed and crumbled, while Lonan landed gracefully. He said, "Leave the rest to me." Didikon said in surprise, "How did you get here? Weren't there countless stone men on the way?" Lonan turned his head and calmly stated, "All taken care of." Didikon said, "Is that possible? I couldn't even defeat one." Didikon instantly became obedient, grateful he had survived Lonan's sword when he had angered him. Lonan said, "Give me that thing. Isn't that the sword for me?" Dolong said, "Yes, that's right. Here you go, though the scabbard isn't finished yet. Worthy of being the Empire's finest sword, it feels great to hold. Can't feel its weight at all. Let them try it out." Facing several stone men 2.5 meters tall, Lonan casually swung out a sword energy. Its overwhelming destructive power shattered them completely. Lonan was stunned. How could it have such powerful force? The old man's expression was enough to show his satisfaction with the sword. He said, "How is it, Lonan? Do you like this La Mancha? That's the name I got from the astrologer. This sword is almost weightless, but its hardness far exceeds mithril by 100 times. Not only that, it has a special property. When it touches blood, it even has regenerative abilities." It could be said that this sword perfectly matched all of Lonan's attributes, and he no longer had to worry about his rough swordsmanship damaging the blade. Lonan praised the old man profusely, delighting him. Having his work affirmed was undoubtedly the meaning of the old man's life, but Didikon interrupted them, saying, "We need to leave this place quickly." Yet Lonan walked toward the deeper levels. He said, "You take the old man and go first. There are still a bunch of rats down here, and they're big rats." Didikon said with confusion, "Rats? What are you talking about?" Lonan said, "I'm familiar with stone giants' habits. They wouldn't normally act in groups, let alone actively attack humans." After speaking, Lonan flipped over the debris, revealing a mysterious pattern on the back of its head. Everyone was shocked at the sight. This kind of pattern was unfamiliar even to Dolong, who had lived for over 400 years. But he could be certain that magical resonance still lingered in the pattern. The other side was using this method to make the stone giants go berserk. Dolong said, "Who do you think would do such a thing?" Lonan shook his head and said, "I don't know. But as long as I go deeper, I'll definitely be able to flush them out." With that, Lonan began to move. He quickly advanced toward the depths, while carefully observing the surrounding environment. Sure enough, he discovered human footprints, and they were of 2 different sizes. Lonan continued forward. He even found magical sensing stones, but being completely devoid of magical power himself, he triggered no alarms. Soon Lonan reached the deepest part of the cave, but he didn't startle his prey, instead habitually concealing himself. Then he began to observe his surroundings. The first thing that caught his eye was a huge golden stone man. Below it were 2 human-looking figures. These 2 weren't eye-catching, but compared to ordinary stone men, they looked like small toys in front of the golden stone man. Though it was still in a dormant state, its destructive power was unimaginable. Just as Lonan was thinking of how to deal with this, the white-robed woman suddenly spoke. "Someone must have broken in. Judging by how the stone giant's control is being rapidly cut off one after another, there must be a third party involved." The white-robed man said through gritted teeth, "What should we do? There are no stone men left, and this golden stone man can't be used yet. Why don't we go up and kill them all?" Hearing this, the white-robed woman immediately shook her head. "No, most of the blacksmith facilities have already been destroyed. The Empire's smelting and weapon manufacturing technology will be set back many years. That's that's enough. On the contrary, if our identities are exposed, that person won't just do nothing. After listening, the white-robed man complained a bit, but ultimately agreed. At that moment, the sulfur smell on Lonen's body caught their attention. It was residue from slaying the ordinary stone giants. The white-robed man said, "No wonder my body feels itchy." After speaking, he cast a fireball spell at Lonen. Only when the fireball was about to hit him did Lonen react. But after an explosion, the white-robed man found that the fireball hadn't hit its target. He said, "You're quite agile. How about I tie you up first?" After speaking, he immediately cast a spell. In an instant, numerous fire chains surrounded Lonen. The speed of gathering magical power was fast. These two were definitely not ordinary people. The white-robed man said, "Tell me quickly who you are, and how you made our magical sensing stones ineffective." Lonen stood up and said, "That's what I wanted to ask. Who are you? I don't care how passionate your relationship is. Just tell me your names." Lonen's tough attitude immediately sparked the white-robed man's interest. The white-robed woman suddenly spoke, "We're wasting time." But the white-robed man didn't care at all. He said, "Let's enjoy this in advance. When this empire is submerged by starlight, there won't be any opportunity." And this sentence precisely hit Lonen's trigger point, because the invading giants had once mentioned, submerged by starlight. They must know something. So Lonen planned to capture the two and get answers. But the white-robed man contemptuously said, "You? Does a wet behind-the-ears kid like you have that ability?" After speaking, he raised his arm to counterattack, and this action successfully exhausted Lonen's patience. With a flash of the blade, the white-robed man lost his arm and his lower body. "Just lie down obediently." The white-robed woman stood frozen. Edward hadn't even had time to react, and Lonen hadn't felt the sensation of cutting through bone, so these two were probably not human. But in his anger, he didn't care much. He directly grabbed the white-robed woman by the throat and said, "Just answer my questions nicely. If you don't want to end up like him, just answer my questions." Seeing she couldn't break free, Cyril immediately cast a magic shield to push Lonen away. Lonen said, "So you don't plan to obey me?" As he spoke, Lonen mockingly tapped on the shield. "Not bad. Very solid." But the next second, Cyril was dumbfounded. With a flash of the blade, her shield shattered. Impossible. How could a physical slash affect magic? Before she could think further, Lonen's sword had pierced her body. The violent movement also caused the hood of her white robe to fall off, revealing her face and long ears. But this didn't warrant Lonen's attention. He stepped hard on the woman beneath him. He said, "Half-elf, what is your purpose?" Lonen's attention was entirely on the woman, completely unaware of what was behind him. And behind him, a huge fireball was hurtling toward him. Lonen reacted quickly, swinging his sword to block the attack. He looked ahead. The severed limbs of Edward had somehow regrown, but he was using dozens of writhing tentacles to mimic limbs. Edward angrily said to Lonen, "Let her go," seemingly very concerned about the woman. Lonen understood immediately. He pulled his sword from the woman's body, but less than 2 seconds later, he thrust the sword into her thigh. Lonen said, "Seems you don't understand the situation. Neither of you is getting away." The intense pain made the woman cry out in agony, but Lonen's eyes never lingered on her, instead focusing on Edward. Lonen said, "Either come with me obediently or she loses her limbs. She doesn't have your regenerative ability, does she?" Edward trembled with rage, but ultimately lowered his head, then extinguished the flames in his hand, saying, "Fine, I'll go with you." Lonen nodded with satisfaction. It would be troublesome if you really died. But at that moment, he saw Cyril grinning madly. Lonen looked at her in confusion, not noticing the golden stone man's arm coming toward him from behind. By the time Lonen wanted to dodge, it was too late. He could only take the hit. The powerful impact sent him flying dozens of meters. Though the force was tremendous, both knew this strike wouldn't be fatal. Edward walked toward Cyril. He asked, "Can you still walk?" The woman nodded. "Thank you. You distracted his attention. So I had the opportunity to control the stone giant. Although I could only control one arm of the stone giant, he must be seriously injured." Edward said, "You go back to the church first and report the situation here. I'll deal with him and then return." Cyril nodded. "Be careful. He's a monster with a child's face." Edward said, "I know. I won't act recklessly again." Before he finished speaking, Edward's limbs separated again. Lonen reappeared in front of the two, then delivered countless slashes, directly cutting Edward into ribbons. Lonen said, "Where do you think you can go? Didn't I say I have many questions for you?" Cyril backed away in fear, then hurriedly took out a scroll to cast a spell. Lonen, forcing his injured body, approached step by step. But just then, Cyril's immobilization spell succeeded. Lonen couldn't move forward another step. He struggled desperately but remained motionless. Even so, Cyril didn't dare approach. She said, "I can't guarantee we could beat you, but my priority now is to report back." As she spoke, a portal lit up behind her. About to enter, she added resentfully, "I'll find out everything about you, then take it away." Watching Cyril slowly disappear into the portal, Lonen was unwilling, shouting again and again, "Don't go!" Having finally found a clue about the giants, how could he let her slip away? "I absolutely cannot let that scene happen again." "Stop!" Lonen shouted with his last bit of strength. However, at that moment, a strange light suddenly appeared around them. Cyril was shocked to find her body also couldn't move. A woman's voice rang out, "I have many questions too." Nabiros activated her energy field and appeared. Cyril was stunned, thinking she could easily escape, but didn't expect an even more powerful being to arrive. Nabiro said, "Well done, Lonen." Lonen said, "Your timing is also good." Nabiros was relieved. He could still talk nonsense, so he wasn't in danger of dying. Then she turned her attention to Cyril. She said, "Let's welcome our guest first." Even trembling with fear, Cyril hadn't given up on escaping. But the next second, a slender hand reached from from behind. Nabiros grabbed her face saying, "Attacking the forge is a serious crime, but what makes me angrier is that you dared to hurt my disciple. Look forward to what's going to happen next." Cyril's face, squeezed until it turned blue, was roughly lifted, and before her was a great snake attacking them. Cyril said, "I'm very sorry, Starlight." After speaking, Cyril collapsed due to severe mental shock, and her words made Lonan even more certain that the giant's appearance was connected to their organization. Nabiros sheathed her sword and walked over saying, "You did well, but I'll report your achievements separately." But Lonan said, "When you mentioned what's next, did you mean sending them to the Lodosan prison?" Nabiros nodded. "Yes, it seems you know about that place." Lonan immediately felt chills down his spine, because Lodosan was a prison floating at sea, where screams and wails never ceased. The jailers would use every means to make criminals who rebelled against the Empire confess. Almost no one entered and came out whole. Lonan said, "Listen to me, teacher. Please let me participate in the criminal's trial." Nabiros immediately refused, fearing that the cruel place would leave psychological trauma on Lonan. Lonan said, "Please, this is really important to me." Lonan used an almost pleading tone because he didn't want to miss any clue about the giants. This was the first time she had seen this proud boy bow his head, but even so, she still didn't agree. Meanwhile, although the Cappadocia Forge was still in ruins, with the help of the academy, the wounded had mostly recovered. Maria wiped her sweat saying, "I think we're almost done." She had earned considerable merit by carrying 7 or 8 boxes of supplies at once, and Assam had also spent much energy using healing spells to save people. But more than this, Assam was more worried about Lonan, who said he would return soon. "But, are you talking about me?" Hearing this, the two were startled and looked up toward the voice. Lonan said, "On the way, I heard about what you did." Maria brought reinforcements, and Assam and Sita treated the wounded. "Are any of you hurt?" Lonan asked, pretending to be fine. Maria said, "Rather than us, you should worry about yourself." And Assam, in an almost trembling voice, scolded Lonan, "You're clearly covered in wounds. Quick, Sita, help heal him." Sita extended her small hand with concern, but Lonan waved it off. "I'm fine. I've already been treated. Just need some rest." Lonan suddenly changed the subject. He stared hard at the two culprits in the distance. He said, "I have more important things to do now." Several hours later, the convoy transporting the criminals arrived at the meeting area. Here, Lodosan prison would send someone to receive the criminals. After Nabiros and Lonan waited for a short while, a sinister jailer arrived riding a vulture. Then 2 equally sinister people came down from the carriage, speaking in an eerie tone. "Hello, Miss Nabiros." Then he looked down at the 2 criminals on the ground. The sight of Edward immediately interested him. He had some kind of miraculous self-healing ability. The judges would be very pleased. After saying this, they prepared to leave with the 2. "We'll notify you after the interrogation is complete. Hope you continue to work for the peace of the Empire." As the words fell, the jailer disappeared from everyone's sight. Nabiros said, "In a week, Lodosan will make them tell everything. I'll notify you immediately when there are results. That's enough, right?" Lonan nodded with satisfaction. "Thank you, teacher." At the same time, he understood this was the most Nabiros could do for him. After this, Lonan returned to the Phillips Academy to continue training, and the restoration work at Cappadocia progressed simultaneously. Time quickly passed, and several days went by. In Lodosan prison, continuous wails never ceased, and awaiting Edward and Cyril would be the cruelest torture and punishment. He was a judge in the prison, and the person responsible for interrogating Edward was him. After a week of intimate contact, Karaka was very certain that Edward had told everything, so he notified Nabiros to come. Karaka said, "Do you want to see the criminal once more? Please follow me. On the way, I'll tell you the judgment results." Then he led the 2 toward the prison where Edward was held. Lonan could hardly believe the seemingly gentle old man was a judge at Lodosan. Nabiros smiled. "At first I thought so too, but he is the nightmare of all prisoners here. Everyone judged by him wishes for an early release, that is, in the form of death." As the words fell, they arrived at the inner prison. Just then, Karaka said, "The prison is not far ahead. They come from the Kragel Nebula, which is also the name of their organization." Nabiros asked in confusion, "This is the first time I've heard this name. Is it a criminal organization similar to Calipolo?" Karaka said, "Yes, but they're more dangerous. First, their identities are unknown. Second, the Naranja arson case and the explosion at the Magic Engineering Academy were also their doing. In the past year's large-scale cases, most were done by them." Lonan was stunned after hearing this. If this organization had done so much, why had he never heard of them in his previous life? Lonan asked, "Did they mention Starlight, or something like Starlight Descending?" Karaka said, "This is the first time I've heard these words." Lonan said awkwardly, "That's what Edward said when I caught him. Because if he said he came from the future, 10 years later, 3 winged bald men would invade, and Starlight was what they said. Nobody would believe such things, originally thinking the matter would end here." But unexpectedly, Karaka's face darkened. Lonan continued, "I think it's related to their purpose, so you probably haven't gotten that out of him yet." At this point, a terrifying aura suddenly made Lonan change his expression, and the source was Karaka. He immediately put on his bird-shaped hood, then walked toward Edward's prison. He said, "I understand. It seems our friend still isn't honest enough. I should show more sincerity." As the words fell, the prison door slowly opened, and the scene before them made Lonan dumbfounded, because the previously arrogant 2 had now been tortured beyond recognition, only faint moans proving they were still alive. Karaka said, "Edward is an interesting friend. He uses some unique black magic to regenerate his body." As he spoke, he picked up a red-hot torture instrument. "Do you know how to get close to this kind of person? Simple. Use this to poke him until he can't regenerate." After saying this, Karaka stabbed hard. Edward Edward could only scream, and this happened again and again, until he was on the verge of death before Karaka stopped. Karaka said, "See, we've become intimate. At least that's what I think." But Karaka suddenly changed the subject, but thinking that this guy is still hiding something. "I feel very disappointed. Friends shouldn't keep secrets, don't you know?" But Edward cried that he had hidden nothing. Karaka didn't believe him, then turned his head toward Lonan. "Then why am I hearing about starlight descending for the first time? I hope this conversation ends with you, not Cyril, because with the same treatment, she would probably die." He turned his gaze to Cyril. She was trembling uncontrollably, begging him to kill her quickly. Lonan was confused at this point. They should have no reason to hide anything. Lonan said, "Perhaps it's not that they don't want to tell, but they can't, like some kind of seal curse magic." Hearing this, Karaka suddenly realized, then walked outside. He said, "Please wait a moment, I'll get something." Minutes later, Karaka returned carrying something strange. It was an ugly eyeball-like thing, the curse eye. It feeds on curses and people. Karaka played with it in his hand for a while, then walked toward Edward saying, "Let's begin." After speaking, he placed the curse eye on the other's forehead. Instantly, countless tentacles grew from the eye, then deeply pierced Edward's head. The intense pain made him scream continuously. Until 2.5 minutes later, the curse eye turned blue, signaling the end of the clearing process. Karaka then spoke, "I'll ask again, what is starlight descending?" Edward, breathing heavily, said, "Starlight is an eternal existence. His blessing will save all the weak in this land." Cyril froze upon hearing this, quickly telling him to shut up. And for Cyril's safety, Edward could only continue, "Starlight descending is our lifelong wish. We will eliminate everything and wait for his arrival." Karaka felt this was too complex. He said, "You mean something is coming, right?" Edward nodded. "The children of the stars." Hearing these words, Lonan was instantly filled with disgust. But regarding the giants, he still refused to speak. Lonan guessed it was the curse restricting his speech. Sure enough, with the help of the curse eye, Edward revealed their organization's ultimate goal. That was to help the giants clear obstacles for their smooth descent to Earth. Hearing this, Lonan could no longer hide his anger, because they were the culprits who destroyed the Empire in his previous life. Lonan walked step by step forward. The judge hurriedly advised him to calm down. Lonan just walked up to Edward, then took a deep breath and said, "The children of the stars you mentioned are the Ahayut, right?" Hearing this, Edward's nerves instantly tensed. He said, "Where did you hear this name? How do you know?" But before Edward could question further, his forehead rapidly swelled. In no time, his entire head was like a balloon about to explode. Lonan was shocked. Is his head going to burst? "Back!" Karaka pulled Lonan away, then immediately deployed a magic shield. And at that moment, Edward's head exploded. A large chunk of flesh and liquid splattered over, but all were blocked by the shield. Then, a steady voice came from beneath the judge's mask. "I didn't expect this situation. This curse is stronger than I imagined, and there may be more than one. I guess the first part of the curse is not being able to reveal their purpose to others. If the first part of the curse is removed, it activates the second part, making their heads explode." Before Lonan could think further, the hand on his shoulder tightened again. Karaka stared at him intensely. "Sir Lonan, what is a Hayut? If this is a secret within the Kregel Nebula organization, how would you know?" So he began to gather magical power. He said, "As the judge of this case, I must know everything. Can you tell me?" Lonan was frightened by this sudden terrifying atmosphere, but he still calmly said it was just something he happened to overhear. "In the underground of Cappadocia, I was the first to discover them. If this word has caused you trouble, then I apologize," Lonan said while taking his hand away. "Is this explanation enough?" Looking at Lonan before him, Karaka was stunned. Although he didn't believe Lonan's words, his intuition told him this child couldn't possibly do anything harmful to the Empire, because in his eyes he saw a firm will boiling. Was it responsibility or belief? No, neither. It was anger toward them. Just then, Nebiros drew her sword directly, saying, "Stop." A pair of bright, fierce eyes stared at Karaka. "Are you questioning my disciple and doing so in front of me?" Karaka said, "Of course not. I'm just confirming. Being careful about everything is better, isn't it?" Seeing the other's docile appearance, Lonan said, "Then I'm glad our misunderstanding is cleared up." But Lonan knew he had been in danger just now, because that old man intended to judge him as well. Looking at the undamaged curse eye on the ground, Karaka said, "It's a pity to lose a cursed eye, but usually they have very strong vitality." Lonan questioned this greatly, asking, "This little thing is powerful?" Karaka said, "Yes, and if you look carefully, it's quite cute. Would you like to touch it?" Just as Karaka was joking, he discovered in horror that the curse eye on his shoulder had turned blue. That meant it had absorbed a curse. Whose could it be? So far from Cyril, it couldn't be hers. Could it be him? Karaka turned to look at Lonan. When using the magic shield just now, he touched him briefly. Could it have absorbed a curse in just that instant? Karaka quickly took down the curse eye and walked toward Lonan, then placed it in his hand. The curse eye visibly expanded at an alarming rate, then exploded directly, ignoring Lonan's fuss. Karaka grabbed his hand and began examining it. Karaka said, "Listen to me. I think you've been cursed." Lonan asked in confusion, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Karaka began explaining, "Have you ever felt restrictions? Like being unable to run or unable to hold steel objects, etc. A curse will restrict certain behaviors of yours." Hearing this, Lonan lowered his head and said nothing. So the reason he couldn't use magic power was because of the restriction of the curse inside his body? Karaka said, "It's okay if you don't want to talk about it, just remember one thing. This curse is very powerful and full of malice." The conversation ended there. Lonan and Nebiros prepared to leave. Karaka said, "Once I crack all of Cyril's curses, I'll notify you." Nebiros nodded and said, "I understand. Just report to me when the time comes." Then Karaka turned to look at Lonan, but the other didn't didn't react even after a long time. Karaka said, "You seem preoccupied." Hearing this, Lonan finally came back to his senses. Lonan said, "Since I learned I've been cursed, I've been a bit preoccupied." Karaka restored his gentle expression and comforted him. "Don't worry too much. You're Philip's student. There's someone at the academy who has deeply researched curses, who might be able to help you. He is Professor Secret from the magic department." After dealing with the Lotusan prison matter, Lonan and Nabiros departed on a vulture. But being cursed lingered in Lonan's mind, and his eyes started to itch. This made him increasingly impatient. But fortunately, Karaka said Professor Secret might have a solution. Seeing his anxious appearance, Nabiros calmly said, "This is one of the known signs. It indicates the curse inside you is weakening. Don't worry, but do you really not know who cursed you?" After hearing this, Lonan shook his head, unable to think who would do such a thing. He was normally so kind and gentle that it seemed impossible for anyone to hold a grudge against him. But Nabiros couldn't agree, and could only secretly turn her head toward the window, because the scene of Lonan beating up Kaldan was still vivid in her mind. But unexpectedly, Lonan spoke up to thank her. "Thank you, Professor Nabiros, for stopping him for me. That old man, his eyes were too cruel. If it weren't for you, I think he would definitely have arrested me on trumped-up charges and forced a confession." Nabiros smiled and said, "This is just my duty as a coach, nothing to thank me for." Lonan looked at Nabiros. She was not only excellent with the sword, but also a rather nice person. The more he looked, the more she seemed like a good person. But strangely, why hadn't he met them in his previous life? Such powerful people should have appeared on the battlefield. Could it be that the Kregel Nebula did something to them? Lonan felt very confused. It was late at night when they returned to Philip's. But early the next morning, Lonan eagerly went to a place, the special practice space of the magic department, Stone Pillar Park. Lonan immediately spotted Andershan, who had been waiting for a long time. Nabiros had asked her to help Lonan find Professor Secret. She greeted Lonan with a smile. "It's been a while since we've seen each other. If not for the professor's orders, I might have met you even later. Are you well?" This radiant personality charm instantly left Lonan at a loss. His heart was extremely tangled. How should I tell her about that incident? What should I do? Where should I start? Forget it, just smile first. Lonan awkwardly squeezed out a smile. "Long time no see. How are your parents?" Andershan was startled after hearing this, then nodded and said, "Everything is fine." Because ever since that incident, Kaldan had been afraid whenever he saw Andershan. Every time he saw Andershan, he would repeatedly shout, "I used the spear, I won't change." Though it sounded bad, in reality it was also bad. Lonan hadn't expected that his small action would bring such a big shadow to Kaldan. At this moment, Andershan suddenly changed the subject. "I heard from the professor that you want to remove the curse inside your body, right?" Lonan nodded and said, "Yes, someone told me to come here and find Professor Secret." But after Lonan glanced at the eerie surroundings, he knew how eccentric this professor's personality was. Andershan could only laugh in agreement. "That's right, his unique office can't be found by anyone who's not from the magic department. So I called a close junior from the 3rd year to guide us, but she doesn't seem to have arrived yet." As she finished speaking, a purple figure appeared before her eyes, then pounced into Andershan's arms like a kitten and said in a cute voice, "I missed you, Sister Andershan. This is a new magic I learned." Andershan hugged her back. "Me too, Elizabeth. Long time no see." Lonan was stunned by this scene. This purple-haired girl was definitely Elizabeth Diakaluzia, who had been chattering about beasts at that time. "I'm sorry for suddenly asking for your help, Elizabeth. Something came up, and I want you to help find Professor Secret," Elizabeth said with an infatuated face while kissing Andershan's hand. "As long as it's your request, I'm willing to do anything." At this point, she noticed Lonan standing to the side. Their eyes met, and both fell silent. Who would have thought they'd be old acquaintances? Lonan greeted first. "Long time no see, Elizabeth." This scene instantly made Elizabeth bristle. "How are you here?" But even more embarrassing was her behavior just now. Nevertheless, Elizabeth still led Lonan on their journey. After walking for a long time, they came to an old house, and the surrounding environment became increasingly eerie. Lonan said uneasily, "You're not planning to bury me here, are you, Elizabeth? As a price for seeing something I shouldn't have." Elizabeth said excitedly, "Don't call me that, and who wants to bury you? Stop talking and just follow me." Elizabeth walked toward the house huffily, and Lonan slowly followed behind her. Surprisingly, the general was so close to this child. But then again, they were both members of the Akalusha family. Was there some special relationship? Before Lonan could speculate further, the two walked into the house, but what greeted their eyes was a sleeping old woman. "Is she Professor Secret?" Elizabeth turned around and said, "Don't get excited, we have one more stage to go." Elizabeth slowly walked up to the old woman, despite the creaking floorboards beneath their feet. The old woman showed no signs of waking up. Elizabeth raised her arm and began to chant a spell. "Kaspa, Lunaja, Delpirim, open." As she spoke, a burst of purple magic instantly spread out. Lonan quickly looked down at the old woman, but her condition seemed unchanged. Suddenly, the old woman's eyes opened rapidly, and her mouth gaped wide. In just a moment, her mouth was large enough to swallow both of them. Lonan immediately backed away vigilantly. But Elizabeth was unusually calm, saying, "No need to be alarmed." Then they walked into the old woman's mouth. Once inside, the view opened up completely. This was an office made up of countless books, Sephirothio. Lonan was stunned by this sight. Was that just the entrance? How strange. Just as Lonan was shocked, a voice suddenly sounded from behind. "So it's you, the the disciple Nabiros mentioned. You're just as I heard. As the voice faded, Secret, who appeared to be only 7 or 8 years old, appeared before Lonan. Just as Lonan was surprised, Elizabeth bowed to the child and said, "Hello, Professor Secret." Seeing this, Lonan narrowed his eyes. How could this child who looked only a few years old possibly be a professor? Secret seemed to notice Lonan's confusion. He said, "I'm actually over 80 years old, just looking a bit young on the outside, but this is also a kind of curse." Lonan laughed after hearing this. I didn't expect there would be such an interesting thing. After explaining all this, Secret snapped his fingers. A giant geometric magic array immediately appeared beneath Lonan's feet. Along with countless semi-transparent characters, let's remove the curse now. Lonan stared at the characters emerging from his body and said, "Why do I have this thing inside me?" Secret said to himself, how can there be so many curses coexisting in a human body, and their ancient curses close to the source? Lonan asked, can these be solved? Secret said, before, I firmly believed there was no curse that couldn't be removed, but this time I can't be sure, because these curses are almost all unknown. Even so, Secret decided to try. He said, I will create an imaginary world in your consciousness. There I will project a curse that torments you. You just need to find the source of the curse binding you and kill it. Lonan frowned after hearing this, not quite understanding what the professor meant. Lonan said, so I must enter a dream and break the curse? How will I recognize it? Secret said, you'll recognize it when you encounter it by instinct. Secret said offhandedly, then placed his hand on Lonan's head saying, take care. As the magic activated, Lonan's consciousness was pushed into a magically created world. When he came to his senses, he was in a forest. The more Lonan walked forward, the stronger the sense of familiarity became. Because wasn't this his home? How could the source of the curse possibly be here? Before Lonan could ponder further, a child's laughter brought his thoughts back. Such a familiar voice, Lonan quickly turned to look. Before him was his sister Eli from when they were young, rushing quickly into the house. She said, I'm back, Mom. The first thing she did upon entering was to stare at her brother with sparkling eyes. So cute. Eli asked, why does little Lonan sleep so much? Is he sick, Mom? A woman who looked very similar to Eli answered with a smile, because babies need a lot of sleep to grow healthy. So Eli, you need to sleep a lot too. Speaking of illness, if little Lonan ever gets sick, you as his sister should take good care of him. After hearing this, Eli excitedly raised her little fist and said, of course, I will protect him forever. Lonan looked at this harmonious family scene, thinking, did I ever have such moments in this life? Lonan was so absorbed that he forgot his purpose for coming here. Without a doubt, this was a scene from shortly after Lonan's birth. So the child lying in this cradle is me? Lonan was dumbfounded. Was I actually a baby when I was born? I thought I started out as an adult. He had such thoughts because his childhood memories had been sealed. However, just then, the sound of a door opening came through. An eerie feeling instantly swept through Lonan's entire body. He tried hard to turn his head to look, but found his body couldn't move. So Lonan could only stare straight ahead as a formless black shadow slowly entered. But the family members seemed happy, with the mother saying, you're back so early? Eli even immediately ran up to hug him. But the shadow threw off her hand and walked toward baby Lonan in the cradle. Mom thought he was eager to see the child, so she smiled and told him, the child is in the cradle. But the shadow extended his arm toward Mom and said some words Lonan couldn't hear. In no time, Mom's consciousness began to blur. What danger? What are you saying? Then she fell to the ground. This scene stunned Eli. She didn't understand what Dad was doing. She was just very worried about Mom who had fallen down. But the next second, the shadow aimed his palm at Eli. He repeated the same technique. Lonan, watching this scene, felt sadness and anger surge up. What are you doing? But what shocked Lonan even more was yet to come. The shadow's arm produced countless semi-transparent characters out of thin air. Those were the same curses that had appeared inside Lonan earlier. As a light flashed, the curse was implanted into baby Lonan's body. At that moment, he understood this person was the source of the curse, and this place seemed less like a virtual world and more like someone's memory. Lonan gritted his teeth. I must kill him. Meanwhile, outside, Secret's hand began to tremble uncontrollably. Despite such thorough preparation, this magic had nearly depleted his magic power. Elizabeth had never seen the professor in such a predicament. How many curses are in Lonan's body? Secret said, aside from the power of the curses, there are about 10 in his body. Elizabeth was too surprised to speak. 10? Then it's not surprising that removing so many curses at once would use so much magic power. But Secret shook his head and said, no, that's not it, because the number of curses I'm dealing with right now is just 1. On the other side, Lonan couldn't accept that this bastard would harm his own family. He gritted his teeth, vowing to kill the other party, but at this moment his body still couldn't move. It wasn't until the shadow stepped out the door that the restraints on his body were lifted. But Lonan didn't immediately chase after him. Instead, he ran to his sister and mother's side. He urgently wanted to help them up, but his fingers passed right through their bodies. Just when he was despairing, he suddenly heard faint breathing, so they were both still alive. Lonan finally breathed a sigh of relief and tried hard to control his emotions. Calm down. What I need to do now is tear that bastard to pieces. As he spoke, a sword appeared in his hand out of nowhere. It was La Mancha. Whether this matter is reasonable or not is no longer important. Lonan swung the sword to open the door, then rushed out like a madman. Soon he saw the shadow before him. The other stood motionless, as if waiting for him. But as soon as he saw the other's face, Lonan couldn't forget what he had done. Dare to hurt my family. I will never forgive you. With that, Lonan charged at the shadow at his fastest speed. Unexpectedly, the other gathered magic power, and conjured a sword out of thin air. The attack was unsurprisingly easily blocked. Lonan was startled, not expecting the shadow to have such ability, but what surprised him more was yet to come. No matter how Lonan attacked, the shadow could easily deflect it, as if toying with him. As the battle continued, Lonan was cut in multiple places. Then the shadow erupted with power, piercing through Lonan's chest with one strike. The ridiculous speed was too fast for him to prevent. Lonan fell to one knee. Multiple wounds had nearly robbed him of all fighting ability, but the shadow merely glanced at him, then left without looking back. Lonan struggled to stand up. This can't end like this. I still have many questions for that bastard. His gaze fixed firmly on the shadow. Then he let out a hoarse roar. Why did you do this? From Eli and Mom's behavior, there was no doubt that person was his father. After doing this, do you still have the right to be our father? Don't you have anything to explain? Hurting Eli and Mom, even cursing me. You're not even going to make an excuse? The moment he heard these words, the shadow froze in place. Seizing the opportunity, Lonan gripped his sword handle, with red magic power entwining it. Then he quickly charged at the shadow, killing him with one strike. If you won't speak, so be it, then get out of my body. After clearing the curse, Lonan returned to the real world. He shook his head hard, trying to emerge from the tense battle state. But unexpectedly, an elderly voice sounded from behind. Was the journey pleasant? Lonan turned to look. Before him was an old man with a kind expression, but wearing the same outfit as Professor Secret. So Lonan quickly guessed his identity. Lonan said, why does your time pass so quickly? Is it because of this curse removal magic? Secret said, no, it has nothing to do with that. Do you feel any different now? Lonan concentrated and looked. The other's abundant magic power immediately appeared, dense and intricate. Lonan said, from the beginning, I felt you were extraordinary, and you're even more terrifying than I imagined. The professor smiled with satisfaction and said, it seems you can now properly sense magic power. In the time that followed, Lonan told the professor about his experience there, and the professor noted it down in his notebook. Secret said, the curse inside you is based on memories you didn't even know about. But why do you think that person was your father? Didn't you say you couldn't see his appearance? Lonan lowered his head and said, I could tell from Eli and Mom's attitudes toward him, and most importantly, when he was hurting my family. I could feel a sad emotion, a very unfamiliar feeling. Thinking back now, that should have been his emotion. Secret nodded, then continued to delve deeper, and Lonan told everything. I have no memories of family, as if they were completely erased. Secret took a sip of coffee and said, then everything makes sense. Your father not only sealed your ability to sense magic power, but also scrambled your memories. But through this curse removal magic, the memory was coincidentally presented. So that might be a chaotic event intertwined with imagination and memory, which is a small error that can occur with this magic. And the final strike you described should also be based on this. So you unconsciously used magic power. After hearing this, Lonan looked at his hand, which had a colorful mixture of several colors. Lonan asked, is this magic power? Secret nodded and said, although you can now sense magic power. To use it like normal people, you would need to remove at least 2 more curses. This process will be very long, because the curses on you are all unknown and powerful. Go back for today, I'll notify you when I'm ready. Just as Secret was writing in his notebook. Lonan was stunned, because somehow the professor had turned back into a child. The professor said, this body situation is complicated, generally similar to yours. Lonan said, then you must be very tired usually. Meanwhile, in the underground of Cappadocia, after learning about the stone giant, Duke Grancia personally came to the scene. He looked up at the stone giant, which was much larger than he had imagined, but he heard that the one who stopped this wasn't Nabiros, but a student under her, which puzzled the Duke. What kind of person would have such power? As the Duke pondered. A righteous young man appeared behind him. This was the Duke's personal guard, Darren. The Duke asked, how is the repair work on the blacksmith shop progressing? Darren respectfully replied, everything is going smoothly. Reportedly, it will be fully restored in a week. And we've investigated those bastards as per your orders, but found no clues. Seeing the Duke thinking, Darren said, through Phillips, we've found the student's location. Would you like to meet him? The Duke nodded and said, it seems we should indeed. Just as he spoke, the stone giant's red eyes lit up, and it slowly prepared to attack. All this was seen by Darren, who said, Duke, I apologize, but could you please step aside? Leave this to our knights. With that, he placed his hand on his sword hilt, but the Duke extended his hand and said, no need. As the stone giant's attack was about to hit, the Duke drew his sword and said, you can attend to other matters. With that, he quickly drew his sword and slashed backward. The moment the sword aura hit, the massive golden stone disintegrated instantly. After cutting, the Duke sheathed his sword, then calmly turned and said, let's go. Let's meet Phillips's little hero. When the boy opened the door, he discovered a person with dirty magic suddenly appeared outside. He couldn't help but curse under his breath, but the other immediately flew into a rage, saying, apologize or let me cut off your tongue. Lonan defiantly replied, door-to-door sales are prohibited here. No, judging by your attire, you're not a peddler, but someone who guards the door for a noble family. Hearing this, the black magic emanating from the other became even more intense, as if he would attack the next second. And at this moment, Lonan also noticed something strange mixed in the other's magic, familiar but indescribable. Just then, an arm blocked Aran. Enough. It's us who intruded without prior notice. Darren wanted to continue. A blue-haired middle-aged man said elegantly, Lonan, I apologize for my knight's rudeness. Though it's rude to say, may I take up a bit of your time? And Lonan, now knowing their identities, agreed. Soon, they arrived at Lonan's dormitory. The Duke immediately took out an exquisite box. Inside was a brand new scabbard. Lonan, bewildered, asked, why are you giving me this? The Duke leisurely drank his tea and said, Master Doron from Cappadocia asked me to do this. He almost got down on his knees begging me. But more than that, I want to express my gratitude in my own way. So the Duke's eyes turned to his sword and said, we Grancia and Cappadocia are long-term partners. My pale path was also made by Master Doron, so I should be more grateful to you. You saved Cappadocia. With that, the Duke reached into his bosom, then pulled out a Grancia badge, startling Lonan, because this thing was too valuable. Lonan had thought he could only get it when Shulafin had an episode. On the other side, Maria and Assam also received gifts from the Duke. The Duke said, I hope they will like them too. Lonan nodded, because he could already imagine the two bowing in gratitude. Speaking of this, the Duke suddenly put down his cup and said, let's talk about something else. Can you tell me who's behind this? I'm very interested. As he spoke, terrifying magic power erupted around him. Lonan was immediately dumbfounded. So this is the head of Grancia? Such terrible power. He said, I don't know how much you know, but these damn guys are even crazier than we imagine. Hearing this, veins bulged on Darren's face, and he couldn't suppress the glowing magic power emanating from him. Lonan was stunned watching this. It seemed as if at the mere mention of those people, Darren would have a strange reaction. Come to think of it, his magic power seemed identical to those two people's, giving a dirty, uncomfortable feeling. So, are they in cahoots? Seeing Lonan lost in thought, the Duke asked with confusion what had happened. What was this reaction about? His subordinate was emanating such intense magic power, couldn't he see it? How could a renowned powerhouse on the continent not see these things? Lonan couldn't believe it. Could it be that only he could see it? To verify his guess, Lonan slowly said, do you know about the Starlight Descending? The Kragle Nebula, the organization supporting Starlight Descending. As he finished speaking, Darren again glared fiercely, but the Duke still showed no awareness, saying, did you discover this yourself? Lonan said, yes, just lightly chopped off their limbs, and they immediately confessed. Then Lonan deliberately made an exaggerated expression. It was so fun. Those bastards cried, begging us to let them go. Do you need me to give you the details? The Duke quickly waved his hand. No need. Hearing more of this would ruin my appetite for dinner. Lonan laughed and shrugged. His thoughts basically confirmed. There was indeed no need to continue. Lonan looked up to see Darren's killing intent completely out of control, his body covered with dense magic power. And at the same time, the Duke also stood up to leave. So Lonan quickly stood up too. He couldn't just ignore this matter. Lonan said, about those bastards, there are some things you should know, but it might take a long time. So Lonan suddenly looked at a notebook to the side and said, once I organize it, I'll give it to you tomorrow. You'll definitely be pleased. Because it's about a Hayut. Lonan said the last sentence particularly loudly, as if deliberately telling Darren, if you don't kill me, a Hayut secret will be made public. That night, while Lonan was sound asleep, Darren suddenly appeared before him. Without any hesitation, he immediately swung his sword. But just as it was about to hit, Lonan disappeared. Then, a voice appeared behind Darren. I said you would definitely come tonight. Nice to meet you, the third bastard from Kragle. Darren's face was filled with disbelief. He turned to attack Lonan. Lonan pointed to the side and said, wait, why don't you look over there first? That's my special guest. When Darren looked over, he was instantly terrified, saying, how can you be here, young master? Shulafin was filled with rage. He said, can you explain this, Darren? Earlier that afternoon, Lonan had come to Shulafin's house and explained his purpose. Shulafin said, Lonan, you claim you're going to ambush Darren tonight. What evidence do you have? Darren is a righteous, loyal, and outstanding knight of the Empire. He was carefully selected by my father. Lonan said, even careful selection can have flaws. Lonan beckoned him to follow and said, you won't believe me if I just tell you, so come along. It won't take much of your time, and you might even catch the villain hiding in your home. The situation unfolded exactly as Lonan had predicted. Shulafin felt so ashamed he wanted to find a hole to bury his head in, but even more than that, he felt anger. He immediately drew his sword and pointed it at Darren, saying, didn't you hear me? I asked you to explain what's going on. Answer me now. Lonan said, it's this obvious, yet you're still asking him? Will you believe whatever he says? Darren remained silent, but he raised his foot, then stomped hard on the floor. The next second, waves of black light instantly emanated from beneath his feet. Lonan and Shulafin were startled. Their bodies suddenly became extremely heavy. Is this that bastard's magic? Before Lonan could react, a swift, powerful strike came slashing toward him. Lonan struggled to raise La Mancha to block the attack and retreated several meters. Then, Darren flashed in front of Shulafin and swung at him. Although Shulafin blocked it, he appeared to struggle. Darren said, it's fortunate that the young master has no experience controlling the aura's range. In such a small room, he can't deploy his secret technique. After saying this, he gripped his sword hilt tightly. He slashed at Shulafin again, who was grinding his teeth in anger. Shulafin said, your skills are different from what I knew before. Have you been hiding your strength all along? Since when? Why did you betray us? Darren, filled with killing intent, replied, betrayal? How childish. I was never an imperial knight from the beginning. Then he mercilessly swung his sword again. When he attacked again, Shulafin, with a grim face, said, is that really so? I've confirmed it. do whatever you want. Before he finished speaking, Lonan instantly rushed in front of Shulafin and blocked the strike. Darren looked at him, shocked. Lonan said, I told you he was a villain. How does it feel to hear these things yourself? Shulafin said, family matters should not be aired publicly. I hope you understand. Since this is our family's villain, let me handle it. He angrily struck at Daran, then quickly flew toward him, gripped his sword with gathered strength, and swung at Daran. To block this attack, Daran retreated several meters. Daran thought, has he been hiding his strength all along? Impossible. There's no need. Could he have grown this much in such a short time? Daran couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Before he could recover, Lonan flashed in front of him, gripped his sword with gathered strength, and swung at him without hesitation. Daran finally couldn't withstand the attack, and was hit hard. The next second, Lonan, filled with killing intent, gripped his sword and swung horizontally. The ground was slashed with a meters-long crack, but Daran jumped up and avoided the attack, and used his shadow kick to send him flying far away. Daran knew that continuing like this was not the solution, and it would attract the Empire's attention, so he thought about escaping. He spotted an open window. He leaped up and quickly flew out of the window. But as Daran escaped outside, he heard Shulafin's voice again. You're right, unlike my father, I haven't fully mastered it, so I can't easily use the storm sword. But you've run to such an open space. You're truly foolish. As he finished speaking, storm winds began to surround Shulafin's blade. This was the secret sword technique of the Granzia family, the storm sword. The next second, a 10-meter radius storm blasted toward Daran. Daran could only use all his strength to slash at the storm, but this was hardly enough to withstand the powerful storm. He was gradually engulfed by it. Shulafin slowly sheathed his sword, leaving Daran in a pool of blood on the ground. Shulafin said, from today onwards, our family no longer has this person. Lonan also arrived at the scene. Lonan said, so it really is the storm sword, such incredible power. But you didn't kill him, did you? Shulafin said, don't worry, I only severed some of his tendons. He won't die. I'll leave him to you. I must quickly return to inform my father of this situation. We must find all the traitors in our family. As soon as he finished speaking, Shulafin rushed back without looking back, leaving Lonan in the cold wind. You irresponsible guy! Just as Lonan was shouting, a golden halo appeared behind him. A figure rushed over saying, what happened, Lonan? Has someone attacked the academy? Lonan turned around, only to find it was the principal and Professor Nabiros. Nabiros was wearing sleepwear completely different from her usual attire, which truly stunned Lonan. Nabiros glared at him, and Lonan immediately showed a subtle smile and said, your pajamas are cute. The principal said, now is not the time to discuss that. Can you tell me what happened? After this incident, Lonan became increasingly cautious. He first asked the principal to repeat after him, saying, Ahayutiz. The principal was confused, but still followed Lonan's words. After confirming the principal wasn't a traitor, Lonan looked at Daran lying behind him. Later, Lonan explained the whole situation in his office. Daran's betrayal, the night attack on the dormitory. After listening, the principal fell into deep thought. A spy infiltrated the Granzia family. The situation is more serious than we imagined. You did very well this time. Thanks to you, we avoided a huge loss. Lonan embarrassedly scratched his head and said, this is what I should DDO. But Lonan concealed his ability to see special magic power. He couldn't be 100% certain of this ability. Besides, if this information leaked, it could be dangerous for those around him. The principal noticed Lonan's distraction and thought he was worried about the Granzia family. So he said, the Granzia family's execution power is strong, so there's no need to worry. By the way, you've made great contributions to the Empire. Not only saving the Imperial Blacksmith Shop, but also identifying the traitor in the Granzia family. So we will give you a corresponding reward. Lonan said, great, I happen to want to establish a club at school. Can you approve it? The principal said, a club? I'd like to know what kind of club. The scene shifts to the academy's main square. Lonan is promoting vigorously. After listening, the students fell silent. Lonan posted his recruitment advertisement on the public notice board, saying, I'm creating a new special adventure club with no age or gender restrictions. He then answered students' questions about the club. This is a very constructive club, aimed at improving combat skills. We're looking for high-quality members to create a first-class club. Additionally, it's the only club approved by the principal to go out for actual combat. After hearing this, everyone discussed among themselves. Interested students can join our club. This also attracted a woman in a red scarf watching from the shadows. She observed Lonan from a distance. A few days later, at the academy's gymnasium, Lonan said, despite my big promotion in the main square, finding new talents is so difficult. Today is the last day. Why? Only Maria and Assam passed the interview. Hearing this, Maria immediately retorted, you dare to complain? Look how strict your interviews have been these past few days. The combat test knocked people to the ground, and those who passed the test were forced to sign life and death agreements. How do you expect them to want to join the club? Assam also said, the whole academy is saying that joining our club is like being a slave. Even 10 lives wouldn't be enough. Hearing this, Lonan said, isn't that what real combat is like? What a bunch of cowards. Forget it. I need people who persevere and are serious. It turned out that Ross also participated in this interview. Although Lonan told him he didn't need to be tested, he still insisted. After the test, Lonan said, it will be very difficult in our club. Can you really stick with it? Ross said, This is exactly what I hope for, as long as I become stronger. By now, the gymnasium was already empty. Lonan told them to go back and rest first. Assam asked, "What about you?" Lonan said, "Maybe someone else will come for an interview, so I'll stay a bit longer." He ended up staying until evening. Lonan didn't see even a mosquito. Really, not a single person. "Let's end for today. Thank you, Andershan, for taking the time to help out." Andershan said, "You're welcome, but it's a shame. If it weren't for my teaching assistant work, I would have applied too." Lonan fell silent. He didn't dare tell her that even if she applied, he wouldn't approve. He must quickly decide whether to let her give up her dream of becoming a great commander, but perhaps he should consider it more carefully. While Lonan was lost in thought, a voice interrupted him. "What a relief. You're still here." Lonan hadn't noticed when she appeared. Lonan said, "Are you here for an interview? Do you want to join our club?" The red-hatted girl shook her head vigorously. She said, "If I joined the club, could I?" Because her voice was too soft, Lonan couldn't hear clearly, so he asked her to speak louder. As soon as he finished speaking, the red-hatted girl took off her red hat. She said, "If I joined the club, could I touch your..." Lonan was stunned. "Touch my what? What inappropriate things are you saying?" The girl immediately explained, "Not you. It's that little cutie on your shoulder." Sita looked confused upon hearing this. Lonan said, "You mean Sita? Join the club and you can touch it." The girl, blushing with embarrassment, said, "Really?" Lonan looked at her puzzled. What a strange person. Unbelievable she was this close to me before I noticed her. She's definitely not a simple person. I think she's exactly the talent I need. Lonan said, "Please tell me your age and name and show me your skills." The girl said, "Third-year magic student, Ophelia." "Well then, I'll begin." As she finished speaking, a massive amount of magic gathered in the girl's hands. The next second, powerful magic burst forth in all directions. The two silently watched. Andershan recognized this as dark magic, though it was the first time she'd seen such perfectly controlled dark magic. Lonan also knew this wasn't easy, but what was more astonishing was, she emitted traces of faint red blood-colored magic. This is definitely. Meanwhile, Ophelia readied her attack stance. Shadow Claw. As soon as she spoke, 3 shadow blades flew from her hands, rapidly shooting toward the dummy. The shadow blades hit the dummy's armor heavily, emitting an intense light. After the dust and fog cleared, the two could see clearly. The dummy's armor had 3 large cracks. Lonan said, "But, Ophelia, did you use..." Before he could finish, Lonan was stopped by Ophelia using telepathy. She said, "Please don't tell others. If it's discovered, things will become very troublesome. Let's talk somewhere else. I have many questions for you." In an instant, the two came to the academy square. Ophelia stared at Sita in her hand. Stroking its cute belly, she said, "So this little guy's a dream bird. Legend has it they born different species depending on their environment. How interesting." Lonan said, "You're interesting too. I heard your race left the Empire long ago." "Vampire race." Ophelia said, "Not everyone left. Some are scattered throughout the Empire. Nobody likes trouble, so they all hide and live in secret." Ophelia looked at Sita in her hand and said, "If it weren't for this little guy, I wouldn't have come for an interview. When I first saw it in this square, I felt blood magic, the innate magic of our race." Lonan suddenly realized, no wonder the first thing Sita did after birth was to suck blood. Hearing this, Ophelia said with surprise, "What, really? It used vampire magic right after birth? How long has it been alive?" "At least 5 years, right?" Lonan said, "No, about 2 months." Ophelia looked at it incredulously, saying, "Impossible, only 2 months? It already emits such high-density blood magic." Suddenly she looked more obsessively at Sita and said, "If this is true, it might be possible. Can I ask a favor of you and Sita? Could you lend Sita to me? I promise I'll work hard in the future. I need Sita's help for research now." Lonan, looking confused, said, "Wait, research? Research what?" The next day, Lonan's group came to the Special Adventure Club's activity room. "I didn't expect the academy to give us a whole building. How generous." Meanwhile, Lonan saw Assam and Maria's new equipment. "Are these weapons from Cappadocia, sent by the Granzia family?" "Yes, Maria's greatsword, Assam's magic bracelet." Because of these 2 weapons, their strength had improved. Maria puzzledly asked Lonan, "Why did you ask us to bring weapons?" Lonan said, "Let's go inside and talk. You must be curious why I established such a club. I said before, we have only one goal, to quickly improve our potential abilities through combat experience." In fact, Lonan was preparing for the day that was coming. Then Lonan took out a map, pointed to a location and said, "The first place we're going is here. The Washan Mountains, still unexplored by the Empire." Hearing this, everyone was surprised. Lonan continued, "You all know that place is unusual, so this will be a good experience. I also have some personal business there, but that's not the most important thing. What's important is to first solve your 2 problems." Hearing this, Maria and Assam looked at him puzzledly and asked, "What problems? Are you helping us end our courses early?" Lonan calmly explained, "Yes, no need to be so surprised, it's quite normal. We'll be gone for at least a week, but don't you still have classes?" The two looked at him in astonishment. Lonan continued, "So, to balance your courses, you can complete them early like I did. That way you'll have time." The scene changes, and the 3 have arrived at the training room. Lonan said, "Before I help you with private courses, I need to check your current skills." Then Lonan provocatively said, "Relax. I'll keep my sword in its sheath, so don't be afraid. But please give it your all, otherwise it'll be boring for me." The 2 were instantly speechless. Maria said, Since he said so, let's try our new precious weapons. Assam heard this and was high-spirited. The next second, the two quickly readied their battle stances. Maria struck the first blow. Gripping tightly, she swung her sword heavily. A huge sword light slashed toward Lonan. Lonan dodged it easily by stepping aside. Immediately after, Assam used telepathy to control stones. As she waved her hand, the stones shot toward Lonan at 180 miles per hour, but Lonan remained unfazed. He dodged them nimbly. Then, his blade moved quickly, forming a dense shadow of swords, blocking each stone. Giving Lonan no time to rest, Maria had already jumped into the air. She gripped her magic-infused sword tightly and slashed mercilessly toward Lonan. Just as the heavy sword was about to hit the ground, Lonan quickly jumped to the right, avoiding this powerful strike. The ground was instantly shattered by this blow, leaving a deep groove. Maria stared intently, quickly swinging her heavy sword toward Lonan. Lonan bent his body and dodged again. The next second, Maria, who had been attacking continuously, instantly switched from offense to defense, barely blocking an unexpected strike from Lonan. While attacking, Lonan could still observe Assam. Assam was floating in the air, continuously summoning large boulders. As she waved her hand, Lonan instantly sprang away. Assam used all her magic to change the boulder's direction, sending it crashing toward Lonan. Lonan smiled knowingly. Just as the boulder was about to crush him, Lonan finally drew La Mancha. All that could be heard was the sound of the sword dancing, and the incoming boulder split into pieces, instantly becoming small rocks. Lonan proudly looked at these small stones, but unexpectedly, Assam once again controlled the fragments, mercilessly sending them flying toward Lonan. In that moment, Maria and Assam were full of fighting spirit. Lonan put down his sword and laughed, saying, "Test over. You've both grown much stronger." Just as the two sighed in relief, Lonan smiled mischievously. Maria and Assam felt a chill down their spines. Lonan said, "Special training begins now." As soon as he finished speaking, Lonan chased after them with his sword. Lonan's training was truly devilish, making the two laugh and cry. Half a month later, Lonan handed thick stacks of grade reports to the principal. The principal said, "You mean all club members have completed their courses early?" Lonan smiled and said, "Yes, that's right. So can we go out now?" The principal said, "Of course. You always surprise me. I'll give you a pass. Take care of yourselves." The scene changes. The group arrives at the Washin Mountains. Maria tries to circulate magic. Unexpectedly, the magic purity is so high. "Which way should we go now, Lonan?" Lonan said, "Please follow me. We're still far from the center." Meanwhile, Lonan's presence entering the mountains drifted toward a palace in the mountains. What a surprise. Someone actually entered the mountains. It's been so long since we had visitors. Let me see who it is. During their journey deeper into the mountains, Lonan, relying on memories from before his transmigration, found an extremely fierce half-beasts. Before his transmigration, half-beasts had covered the entire mountain range with their powerful reproduction abilities. Later, they committed all kinds of atrocities, plundering and killing civilians in surrounding areas. For this reason, Lonan set the club's first mission, eliminate the half-beasts. Maria didn't seem convinced. Assam said, "There are too many half-beasts. Can we really defeat them?" Lonan said, "Don't be afraid. I've got you covered. This is a good combat opportunity." Lonan looked at the distant half-beasts, deep in thought. They shouldn't appear so quickly. A stronger species in this mountain, the ogres. Dealing with ogres would be quite difficult, especially their leader, the two-headed ogre. But they won't appear for a long time. Just as Lonan was about to give the order to act, a voice from behind stopped him. "Your intentions are good, but I don't recommend doing this. Now is not a good time." Lonan was startled. When did he appear? I didn't sense his presence at all. Who is that elf? Seeing Lonan staring at him with killing intent, the elf said, "No need to be so alert. I'm a priest who stays in the mountains, serving a sacred deity in the mountain Senial. Let's talk somewhere else, shall we?" Lonan wasn't convinced and vigilantly grabbed his sword. The next second, a figure flashed by. Lonan's La Mancha was already at the elf's neck. Assam and Maria were puzzled. Lonan said mercilessly, "I'm very sorry, but there have been too many bastards lately, so please repeat after me." The priest looked confused. "What do you mean? Repeat what?" "The arrival of angels as the day star light descends. A Hayut is a bastard." After the priest repeated it without any change, Lonan slowly moved his sword away. The priest said, "As a person who serves God, saying words that insult others is so embarrassing. This is the most embarrassing moment in my 200+ years." Lonan wasn't impressed. 200+ years? How long have you lived? "I'm not sure. I haven't counted for a long time. It should be over 1,000 years. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. 1,000 years? That means he lived before the empire was established. Then he puzzledly asked the elf, "Just now you said it's not a suitable time. Why did you say that?" The priest said, "Because the monsters here have been behaving strangely lately. They're not nocturnal creatures, but recently they wander and gather in the mountains every night. And ogres who rarely leave their territory also frequently appear. So I advise you not to act now. You can rest a bit and wait for a suitable time." Then the priest gently tapped with his finger. His magic spread in the air like water droplets in all directions. Then a hole formed in the air. The priest said, "Let's go," and let everyone into the hole. Inside was a magnificent palace. "This is Senial's temple." Assam said, "Lonan, do you know this temple?" Lonan said, "Would I have this expression if I knew? It seems this elf is not simple. Lonen's group, led by the priest, came to a stone in the palace. Lonen puzzledly said, "Is the deity you serve this simple stone?" The priest said, "Simple? This stone has its own meaning. You would find its story tedious. Now please put down your luggage and rest well. Our temple has many empty rooms. Feel free to ask if you need anything." Hearing this, Maria seemed to remember something. She said, "Lonen, didn't you come to find something?" Lonen asked, "Do you know the dwelling place of the curse eye?" The priest said, "You mean the curse eye? Why are you looking for that monster? Do you have a curse on you?" Lonen was startled. He asked, "How did you know?" The priest said, "I see I was right, because there are strange and dangerous echoes around you. Lonen, can you give me some time? I want to talk with you." The scene changes and the two are sitting leisurely in a pavilion. The priest said, "When I first saw you, I guessed you weren't an ordinary student." Lonen was puzzled by why he asked this. Then Lonen grabbed LaMancha beside him. "Is this guy really not related to those bastards? But I can't see dirty, magic power on him." And after mentioning a Hayut, he didn't change. At this time, the priest handed over a brewed tea and said, "Have some tea. It will help your body." Lonen looked at the hot tea. He didn't put anything strange in it, did he? As Lonen hesitated, a tea fragrance wafted out. This fragrance, Lonen had never smelled it before. Suddenly, Lonen's eyes widened. What's with this active magic flow? At the same time, the priest smiled at him and said, "How do you find the tea? Don't you like it?" After the priest drank the tea, Lonen also took a small sip. The moment he drank it, his eyes became brighter. He could see the magic around him more clearly. Lonen looked at the tea in his hand in amazement. The principal said, "This is a herb from the Washin Mountains that can enhance magic affinity, making you more clearly sense magic. But logically, since you're cursed, you shouldn't see the effects so quickly. However, I'll package it for you later. Regular consumption can suppress part of the curse. So please don't use the curse eye to remove the curse anymore. Although it can remove part of the curse, it also takes away part of the target's life essence. Repeated use will threaten life. Don't tell me you're using it knowing its side effects." Lonen said, "I didn't know at all. I just wanted to remove the curse as soon as possible." Subsequently, the priest advised Lonen. Meanwhile, Lonen recalled that the professor had said the same thing, even knowing they were all helping him. Ever since meeting that man, he seemed to have become very impatient. Before catching that bastard, he still needed to stay alive and be careful. Speaking of which, who exactly is this elf? He didn't seem to have seen him before his transmigration. Somehow, he gave Lonen a familiar feeling. After thinking for a moment, Lonen slowly picked up the teacup and said, "I was too hasty, because lately many crazy bastards have been doing dark and dirty things. They're waiting for the stars to come." Hearing this, the priest remained silent. His expression became solemn. The scene changes to the palace under the night sky. The priest stared blankly at the stone, thinking, if what Lonen said is true, then those bastards must be planning an evil plot. It could be a huge disaster. Innocent people will be involved. Should I stand by again this time? Or is the arrival of that child your answer to me? What should I do? While the priest was still deep in thought, the sound of footsteps caught his attention. Lonen had already come behind him. The priest said, "Not asleep yet, Lonen? Not used to the beds here?" Lonen said, "No, I just wanted some water." Seeing the priest staring at the stone, he couldn't help but ask him again, "Does this ordinary stone have something special? Why do you worship it?" The priest patiently explained, "Every 1,000 years, our church moves 1,000 stones to the Holy Land. There, wind and rain are constant, and most stones are weathered away. But some stones withstand the 1,000-year test. We revere such a stone and turn it into a senile statue. I still clearly remember the day we moved this sacred statue. My friends were very enthusiastic, but devoting one's life to a god is something many cannot do. I hesitated many times about whether to leave. There was a time when I wanted to abandon our teachings and gain freedom. I had a premonition, possibly the will of Senil in the statue. I vaguely heard him asking me to stay, saying this would save the world, as if destined. Something only I could do. I couldn't give up. Lonen seemed to see Andershan's shadow in him. I feel that moment is getting closer and closer. The next day, seeing the gradually acclimating Assam and others, Lonen had put last night's conversation out of his mind. After drinking the tea here, Assam and the others all enhanced their magic affinity. Later, Lonen traveled throughout the mountain range with the priest to search for medicinal herbs. Looking at the kindly smiling priest, the questions in Lonen's heart still remained unanswered. The first time he met us, he was so kind to us. And during these days staying here, he has been very caring toward us. The more I look at him, the more I think he's a strange elf. Several days later, when Lonen and his team had recovered and were preparing to go fight the orcs, the priest worriedly said, "I haven't found out why the monsters have become strange. Are you really going?" Lonen smiled and said, "Don't worry, they've just become strange, not stronger. Besides, these people are strong enough to handle it, so don't worry. Most importantly, our time is running out, and we must return to the academy to study soon." The priest could only sigh helplessly. After speaking, he gathered magic in his hands. The next second, countless light motes floated into the air. The priest said, "I've cast a barrier entering spell on you. With it, you can freely enter and exit the palace. If any danger occurs, don't hesitate. Come back immediately. You must not let your guard down. The forest is full of dangers everywhere." Meanwhile, deep in the mountain range, a mysterious female elf seemed to be searching for something. This is becoming troublesome. Who would have thought he'd be so hard to find? As expected, I can't easily lure him out. Could you be with those stupid monsters? Well, if that's the case, then I'll have to meet you in person, Sarante. When Lonen's team arrived at the orc tribe, they they first carefully observed them from high ground. The orcs were happily dividing the gold and silver jewelry they had plundered. Taking advantage of their relaxed defenses, Lonen gave the order to act. Everyone had already prepared for battle. Let's kill them all! Just as the orcs were proudly showing off the necklaces they had stolen, Assam cast a telekinetic magic. Then Maria and her companion land safely. Both sides were poised and ready. The next second, before two orcs could react, they were instantly cut in half. Following that, amid flashing blades, several orcs had already been dismembered. Seeing the fallen orcs, the remaining orcs roared in anger. In an instant, they angrily rushed toward the two people. Suddenly, several rocks flew toward the charging orcs. The orcs who were hit fell to the ground. The next second, even faster rocks killed the orcs who hadn't yet reacted. It was Assam using telekinetic magic to control the rocks. Lonen beside her couldn't help but admire how precisely she controlled them. The orcs then realized it was the two people in midair who were responsible. Lonen encouraged Assam, saying, "Do something stronger, eliminate them all." The timid Assam then waved her hand, and the rocks in the sky instantly bombarded the orcs. The orcs were battered and scattered. A moment later, the orc tribe had been completely wiped out. After the dust settled, Lonen's team came down to clear the battlefield, looking at the corpses strewn everywhere. Assam was about to cry, "I killed so many, will I be punished by heaven?" Lonen smiled and comforted her, "Don't worry, we'll be punished together." Ross even gave her a thumbs up. Assam didn't know whether to laugh or cry, "So I'll still be punished after all?" Suddenly, Sita poked Lonen's face with her palm, then turned to point toward a tree below. Everyone looked and saw someone tied to a tree. Looking closely, it was a beautiful elf covered in wounds. Lonen and his team ran over, quickly untied her, then asked Sita to cast healing magic. Afterward, the elf slowly opened her eyes. After seeing Lonen and the others clearly, she showed a surprised expression and said, "Who are you?" But the next second, she suddenly coughed up blood. Lonen hurriedly went to support her. "Can't even Sita heal her injuries?" The elf asked, "Judging from the magic surrounding you, did you just come from the temple?" As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly grabbed Lonen's shoulder, desperately begging him to take her to see that person. Then, with a fearful expression, she said, "Those people are coming. If this message isn't delivered to him in time, he'll be in danger." Before she could finish, she had already collapsed on the ground. The scene changes. Sarante is wiping a large stone. Behind him, a foot steps in. Lonen, carrying the female elf on his back, hurriedly shouts, "Sarante!" Sarante looks at him in surprise and says, "Why have you returned so quickly? What happened?" Lonen says, "She's a female elf we rescued from the orc tribe. She wants to see you." Sarante looks at her incredulously. "An elf? Wants to see me?" Looking at the badly wounded female elf, Sarante reaches out to cast a spell on her, saying, "Lonen, please tell me the details." The scene changes. Maria and the others remain at the orc tribe, searching around to see if there are any more captives. But they find none and are about to return to the temple when Assam stares at the fallen orcs. Maria says, "Have you found something, cutie?" Assam explains, "These orcs are a bit strange. There's a hidden double magic on their foreheads, something I've never seen before. But what kind of magic is this?" "These magic circles." Just then, Lonen arrives carrying the wounded female elf. Sarante quickly takes her to a room for treatment. A moment later, Sarante smiles and says, "She's all right now." Lonen breathes a sigh of relief. Just now, healing magic had no effect on her. I was worried she might have been poisoned. Sarante says, "I injected her with antidote. Thank you for bringing her here in time. Otherwise, I would have lost a close friend." Lonen says, "Close friend? So she is also." Sarante says, "Yes, she's one of the few who believe in Senil, once a faithful and sincere believer. Now that you've saved her, how should I thank you?" Lonen scratches his head embarrassedly and says, "It was nothing. Don't mention it, but please tell me." Before she collapsed, she said, "They are coming soon." "Who are they? Are you really in mortal danger?" After hearing this, Sarante fell silent. The scene changes. Sarante takes Lonen to the stone. Sarante says, "Actually, I'm not very clear myself. They are a religion that worships an unknown entity. They're very mysterious. I don't know who they are. I only know they've committed many crimes. They call themselves Nebula." Upon hearing this name, Lonen exclaims in surprise, "Those bastards are coming for you?" Sarante says, "You know them too? They've sent assassins to find me several times, but eventually gave up when they couldn't find me. I thought they had abandoned their search, as things have been quiet for hundreds of years, but now it seems they're back." Lonen immediately becomes agitated. "And you're so calm about it? You should leave this place immediately." But Sarante says, "I cannot leave this place. The souls of everyone live here. If I move elsewhere, innocent people will be affected, and I don't want that. Therefore, I hope you leave here quickly. I don't want anyone to get hurt." After hearing this, Lonen says with concern, "Sarante, wait for me. I'll go get powerful reinforcements. Until then, please hide and don't act on your own, okay?" Sarante hears this and can't help but smile, saying, "I understand, I'll hide well." After saying this, he hands something to Lonen, saying, "Please accept this. It's payment for saving my close friend." Lonen says, "What is it? Is this a ring?" Sarante says, "Yes, it's an entry ticket to the Mage Tower. If you go to the Dawn Mage Tower, please show this to the tower's administrator. They'll definitely find information about your curse. All right, be careful on your journey. I'm very glad to have met you. The time spent with you has been a blessing." Lonen says, "It's not like we'll never see each other again. Why are you saying such things?" "I'll be back soon. Wait for me. After saying this, Lonan rushes off, and Sarante watches him with a lonely expression. Afterward, his face becomes serious as he says, should I be happy about our long-awaited reunion, my long-lost close friend? No, I should now call you Nebula's assassin, Brigidia. The previously injured elf suddenly stands up, with lightning surrounding her body, her hair instantly turning from yellow to white. Brigidia smiles and says, how have you been doing, Sarante? Sarante says, they chose you as an assassin? It seems your organization is quite violent and cruel. Brigidia says, you giving a paralytic drug to a patient. Isn't that the same? Sarante says, of course, because your poor acting was too easy to see through. Even pretending to be captured by orcs. Brigidia says, I had no choice. Meeting you isn't an easy task. I used the monsters here to attract you, but couldn't draw you out. However, by coincidence, I just happened to see those people running around with your magic. I thought if I killed them and left them around you, it might draw you out. But I held back, because I'm a devout believer. Touched? Sarante says, if that's the case, I won't let you succeed. Brigidia says, how scary, can't I even joke now? Alright, small talk ends here. My purpose in coming here is to convey the organization's order. Persuade Sarante. If he refuses, kill him. Before she finishes, both sides are at a standoff. In an instant, the energy from both clashes together, creating an explosion. The temple surroundings shake. Lonan, who has left the temple, notices this too. But just then, he meets Assam and the others returning. Maria says, Lonan, there you are. Lonan says, yes, did you find any other captives? Maria says, no, but we discovered something suspicious. Assam says, I found strange magic circles on each orc's head. Magic circles I've never seen before. Lonan listens with a puzzled expression. But at that moment, a huge lightning bolt strikes behind him. Everyone is shocked. Was that explosion sound from the temple? At this moment, Lonan suddenly has a bad feeling. At the same time, a huge foot stomps down, causing the ground to shake violently. Turning to look, suddenly a giant monster appears, ferociously tearing everything apart. After everyone gets a clear look, they realize this monster actually has two heads, a two-headed ogre. Looking at its enormous form, Assam and the others hesitate, momentarily unsure what to do. Behind them, Lonan holds his sword and shouts, pull yourselves together, follow me, you can't handle it. The ogre just looks at them contemptuously. The next second, a hand unexpectedly appears behind Ross. Ross says, what's happening? I can't move my body. The huge hand slams hard on Ross, sending him flying at 180 miles per hour. He crashes heavily into a wall. Assam and Maria are dumbfounded. Before they can recover, the two-headed ogre raises its fist high again, then mercilessly brings it down. Surprisingly, they can't move their bodies either. At that moment, a sword flies out like a gust of wind from behind. Lonan helps them block the attack, but the ogre's fist isn't injured at all. The two-headed ogre is also very surprised. He could block my punch? Lonan instructs Assam and Maria, take Sita and look after Ross. Leave that thing to me. Meanwhile, Sarante and Brigidia are engaged in combat. The collision of energy even cracks the temple walls. Brigidia rushes over with his sword swinging at an extremely fast speed. Sarante quickly casts a spell to resist. Wind control art. Centered on Sarante, fierce winds continuously swirl around. But the next second, they quickly gather into a storm heading toward Brigidia. Seeing this huge storm, Brigidia isn't afraid at all. Instead, she shows joy and says, great, this is exactly what I wanted. Before she finishes speaking, she immediately imbues her sword with dark magic. A murderous aura instantly bursts forth, gathering the surrounding dark magic into the heart of her sword. As the sword swings, it transforms into a black light pillar flying rapidly towards Sarante. The two powerful forces converge in midair. Unable to determine a winner, the resulting explosion shatters everything around them. After the smoke clears, both are unharmed. Suddenly, Brigidia disappears at extreme speed. Only the sound of a sword swing is heard. Brigidia suddenly appears in front of him. Sarante is startled, but the magic shield he had prepared beforehand blocks the attack. Their murderous gazes briefly meet. Energy bursts forth again, immediately pushing them apart. Brigidia says, as expected of you, such an old fox, killing you would be a waste. Come to our organization, you can definitely get a management position. Sarante angrily refuses, no way. I can't serve an evil cult. Anyway, you've become quite rusty, and your movements have slowed down. Is your cult not suitable for you? Brigidia says, of course not. I'm just a bit bored. Just wanted to see you act. I know you've been busy buying time for those children to escape. Your pretense is to keep those people from getting involved, right? Do you think this will let them leave safely? Why would you with no interest in the world protect them so much? Sarante seems to have been seen through. He looks at her in surprise and says, they are just guests I happen to meet. Don't harm them meaninglessly. If you dare touch them, I can't let you leave politely. But Brigidia says dismissively, oh my, how scary, but what can I do? Before she finishes, a loud explosion comes from deep in the forest. Sarante is startled. That direction is Lonan. Brigidia, you bastard. Before he can react, Brigidia has already flashed behind him. She smiles eerily and says, Sarante, is now the time to be distracted? There's only the sound of a sword falling. Sarante's arm falls. Elsewhere, after Lonan told them to leave, the two-headed ogre slammed down a palm, which Lonan immediately blocked. Maria and the others couldn't help but hold their breath in anxiety. Lonan approaches the ogre's side. After looking carefully, he discovers its eyes have been enchanted. Identical to the stone men of Cappadocia, this is definitely the work of the Nebula organization. While Lonan is observing, the two-headed ogre attacks again, forcing forcing Lonan to quickly retreat and dodge. He then immediately launches an attack. He leaps into the air, grips Ramancha tightly, then swings toward the center of its body, followed by several more sword strikes. But the ogre's skin has hardened, preventing fatal damage. Damn, still as hard as before. This strike also angers it. Before Lonan can land, the two-headed ogre is already swinging its fist at full force toward him. By the time he reacts, the fist is already in front of his face, but he manages to block it with his sword. However, the massive recoil quickly pushes him back. To avoid being thrown far away, he can only thrust his sword into the ground, but is still pushed back several meters. His sword-holding hand continues to tremble. Damn, its strength is just as great as before. Seeing that Lonan hasn't fallen, the T2-headed ogre pulls up a tree with its left hand, grabs an ogre with its right hand, then throws them both. But Lonan shows no tension. He sets his face grimly, glances at the fallen Ross, and says, "You've done something you shouldn't have, hurting my friend right in front of me. Bastard, you're dead." Just as the tree flies to his face, Lonan quickly swings his sword, instantly cutting the tree in half. Then he uses the halved tree as a platform, darting back and forth among the trees, finally appearing above the two-headed ogre with lightning speed. Lonan grips his sword hilt, gathering power. "The reason I couldn't defeat you quickly before crossing over was because I had no weapon, no techniques. Now it's different. I have Ramancha and Professor Nabiros's techniques." In an instant, the energy around Lonan quickly gathers in his sword. Rotating blade, Ramancha spins rapidly, generating cutting force, passing through the two-headed ogre at extreme speed. The moment Lonan lands, he slowly sheathes his sword. The two-headed ogre is puzzled, wondering how he passed through. As Lonan closes his sword, its body instantly shatters into pieces. A confident man never looks back. That took a bit too long. Lonan slowly walks toward Assam's group and says, "How's Ross? Is he okay? Don't worry, we've already done first aid, but he still needs proper examination." Seeing that Ross has no major injuries, Lonan breathes a sigh of relief. Lonan says, "Then you continue treating him here." Assam says, "Lonan, what about you?" Lonan says, "I'm going back to the temple to see what's happening." When Lonan reaches the temple, he is immediately shocked by the scene before him. Before he left, the temple was still magnificent and sacred. How could it be completely destroyed in the blink of an eye? What happened? I wasn't gone that long. At the same time, Lonan senses footsteps behind him. Looking back, Sarante is pale, breathing heavily, and has lost an arm. Yet he actually smiles and says, "It seems you're safe. I'm sorry. I should have come to save you immediately." Sarante walks over unsteadily, and Lonan immediately runs to support him. Lonan says, "What happened?" Sarante says, "I'm fine. Don't worry. You need to leave here quickly." Before he finishes, suddenly a black shadow pierces Sarante's center. Sarante spits out a mouthful of blood. Then, a figure rapidly approaches from behind Lonan. Looking back, a female elf wielding a sword leaps down. She smirks at Sarante and says, "Is this how you treat an old friend? I didn't expect that with one arm cut off. You could still cast such a powerful killing move, almost taking my life. Too bad I've received the blessing of the stars, so you can't kill me." Sarante grits his teeth upon hearing this. Then, the female elf teasingly says to Lonan, "I didn't expect you to survive the two-headed ogre. Impressive." Lonan glares at her angrily and asks, "Who are you?" Brigidia says, "Oh my, how forgetful of me. You haven't seen this face yet. Let me greet you again. Thank you for saving me." After saying this, Brigidia disguises herself as the injured elf again. Seeing this, Lonan realizes. He says, "You're the elf who was captured by the orcs? I really appreciate you. Thanks to you, I could pass through the barrier to the temple. As a reward, I'll make your death quick." With that, Brigidia unleashes a powerful aura. Two black energy streams surge forth like floods, then transform into several shadow blades flying toward Lonan. After the smoke clears, only a large crater remains on the ground. Brigidia says, "Interesting. You actually dodged it." Lonan ignores her. He looks gravely at the injured Sarante. He says, "Sita, help heal Sarante. You must save him." Sita immediately casts healing magic to treat him. Meanwhile, Lonan slowly walks over and says, "You bastards not only destroyed the Empire's blacksmith shop, but also sent spies to monitor the Empire. And now you've come here to wreak havoc. Nebula Organization?" Brigidia says, "How interesting. Then you must have met our star's children. I heard there's a kid recently going around killing believers on missions. Could that be you?" As she finishes, Lonan catches her off guard and thrusts his sword at her. However, Brigidia easily dodges with a sidestep. Brigidia says, "Such skill at your age, no wonder they fell at your hands." Seeing that she dodged his attack, Lonan immediately backs away to create distance. But Brigidia flashes next to Lonan in an instant, swinging her sword. Lonan blocks the attack with some difficulty. She seems able to predict my movements. I'll need to kill her in one go when she lowers her guard. Lonan swings at her. Brigidia smiles as she catches his attack. Brigidia says, "I really like you. Killing you would be a waste. Would you like to join our organization? We'll provide benefits and accommodations." Lonan immediately refuses, saying, "You must be dreaming." Brigidia says, "You have no choice." As she finishes, several dark energy spikes pierce Sarante's body. "If you refuse, I'll kill him first." Lonan widens his eyes in shock. He grips his sword tightly. Brigidia laughs maniacally. "Sarante's life depends on your decision. Now make your choice." Lonan says, "My decision is to tear you apart, you bastard." Lonan strikes with all his might. Brigidia quickly retreats several meters. She says, "The more you resist, the more I want to have you. in just the next few dozen seconds. The two have already exchanged several rounds of attacks in midair. Two sword energies clash fiercely in the air, creating ripples of invisible energy waves, seemingly making even the surrounding air tremble. Sarante watches with concern. Meanwhile, Lonan leaps up, grasps for Mancha to gather strength, and swings at Brigidia. Brigidia smiles perversely. Excellent, it's been a long time since I fought someone so strong. At the moment Lonan swings his sword, Brigidia catches it with one hand. She says, killing you would be a waste. Be obedient, be a good child. If you move again, I might not be able to resist killing you. As she finishes, a dark energy suddenly pierces deep into Lonan's body. Brigidia says, when you open your eyes again, the starlight will welcome you. Lonan has no time to defend. Just as the sword is about to pierce his heart, a green light suddenly appears, protecting Lonan. Brigidia angrily says, Sarante, you again. It was the shield magic cast by Sarante. Sarante says, I told you, if you dare touch him, I will never spare you. Lonan says, Sarante, your injured body can't withstand the power of casting magic. Leave this to me. Sarante says, you've done very well, you've bought me time. Now leave the rest to me. As he finishes, a blue light envelops Lonan. With a wave of Sarante's finger, Lonan is instantly moved away. Seeing this, Brigidia immediately pursues with her sword, but her body is filled with blue lightning. Unable to move, she looks up. 3 forbidden magic circles have appeared in the sky. Brigidia is startled. When did you? How can you with so many wounds still? Sarante says, Brigidia, our relationship ends here. Goodbye, my former sister. Then, a huge blue lightning bolt strikes down. The lightning struck Brigidia, screams in pain. Lonan watches in disbelief. Despite Brigidia's painful screams, Sarante shows no mercy. Instead, he intensifies the lightning's power. Sarante says, I must kill her at all costs, even if I burn up all my magic and life force. The suffering Brigidia becomes extremely angry. Sarante, you stone-worshipping fool. How dare you, how dare you? As she finishes, Brigidia instantly erupts with a powerful dark aura and walks forward. She says, I am the chosen apostle of the stars. As long as he grants us the blessing of the stars, no one dares block our path forward. There's no need to pacify someone like you anymore. So just die now. Sita immediately flies in front of Sarante to protect him. Seeing that Brigidia hasn't fallen, Sarante uses telepathy magic to tell Lonan, can you hear me, Lonan? There's no time. I'll be direct. Her star blessing seems to resist my magic attacks, but she's heavily injured and moving slowly. I'll keep her busy. You take the chance to leave quickly. Lonan recalls that the giant before his crossing also had this ability, then says, who allowed you to say goodbye? As he finishes, sword energy suddenly flies toward Brigidia. Brigidia hurriedly blocks it. Sarante is startled and looks back to see Lonan still in place. Lonan says, don't think about giving up, Sarante. It's not over yet. What you don't know is that I've never run away before or now. So please trust me this once. Both turn to look at the roaring Lonan. Brigidia waves her hand and says, seems I was too gentle earlier. Die now. Several dark sword blades rush toward him like a tide. Just as they're about to hit, a blue lightning envelops Lonan. Brigidia is also trapped by blue lightning again. Taking this opportunity, Sarante quickly gathers magic on his index finger. The moment his finger points down, Brigidia is struck hard. But because of her magic immunity, she's not affected at all. She says, do you think this means anything? When I have the star's blessing, you don't even qualify to hurt me. As Brigidia swings her sword down, Lonan has already appeared in front of her. There's only the sound of a sword. Brigidia's arm falls. It was Lonan's quick sword strike. Lonan says, I hope you keep thinking that way. Brigidia's face shows disbelief as she says, how did you break through the star's blessing? The next second, her face contorts as she screams frantically, this is impossible! But before she can say another word, her body is covered with countless sword wounds. This is impossible. Blood splatters from her body. Lonan says, then go ask him yourself. That star you believe in. Blood sprays from her body, and she finally falls. Die now? Just a little more time, and I could have attained the truth I sought. I've waited so long for this. I wonder if you found your truth, Sarante. With that, Brigidia slowly closes her eyes. Lonan looks at the fallen Brigidia, feeling emotional. If she hadn't been complacent because of the star's blessing, it would be me lying there. But before my crossing, it seemed only I could harm the giant, others couldn't. Now even Brigidia has this ability. Can this power be used in the name of a blessing? At this moment, Sarante behind him shakily calls for Lonan. Lonan immediately runs to his side and says, Sarante, hang on, Sita, save him. But Sita can do nothing. Lonan says, Sarante, hold on a little longer, I'll call for a more skilled healer. But Sarante grabs Lonan's hand and says, Lonan, I'm fine. I'm sorry. I beg you one last favor. A moment later, Sarante slowly leans against the sacred stone, his body continuously coughing. The next second, he coughs up blood. I'm sorry you have to see me like this. Lonan blames himself. I'm really sorry. If it weren't for me, none of this would have happened. But Sarante interrupts him. Don't say that. It was only a matter of time. It's not anyone's fault. Lonan, this will be a long and difficult battle. You may lose much in the future. I'm sorry to say this, but please never give up. I believe you can do it. Lonan looks at him sadly. Suddenly, the sacred stone behind Sarante emits light. Then, centered on Sarante. A dazzling light also shines forth. After the light dissipates, Sarante's body slowly turns to stone. But Sarante smiles and says, "Thank you, Lonen, for helping me find the truth. I will stay with the god Senyel, forever by your side, watching over you." As he finishes, Sarante transforms into an oval stone. Lonen watches silently. At this moment, the cloudy sky gradually clears, revealing a ray of sunlight. Rest in peace, Sarante. Afterward, Lonen prayed for Sarante and then left this place, returning to the academy. The scene shifts to the principal's office. The principal looks at the adventure summary submitted by Lonen. He says, "Your club's adventure activities are really dangerous. I'll have to think carefully before letting you go out next time." Lonen quickly explains, "It was all because of that crazy woman. Next time won't be so bad, so please don't ban our club activities." The principal says, "You suffered such serious injuries, and you witnessed Salant's death. Are you really okay, Lonen?" Hearing this, Lonen clenched his fist. Then he said, "Saying I'm fine would definitely be lying to you. But if I became depressed, I think he would be even sadder. So don't worry about me. Thank you for your concern." Seeing this, the principal didn't pursue it further. "All right, I understand. That puts my mind at ease. You eliminated the orcs and defeated a criminal. I can't punish students who accomplish such great things. But can you promise me that if you encounter that organization again, you won't do anything rash? I can't let my students take such big risks." Lonen immediately agreed. "Of course, I promise. If there's nothing else, I'll go now. I'll come see you before our next adventure." As Lonen hurried away, the principal hesitated for a moment, wanting to give some advice. Lonen hadn't been attending classes lately, so he probably hadn't heard. The scene shifts to the club building. Lonen had intended to supervise their training, but it was empty. Assam and the others weren't there. However, a familiar figure was sitting formally. Lonen said, "Why are you here, Shulafin?" Shulafin turned to look at Lonen with a serious expression. "Finally, you're here. I hope you have time now. We need to talk about the Nebula organization." Lonen didn't exchange simple greetings with Shulafin, but directly asked him, "What do you want to tell me? Did you deal with those traitors at home before coming?" Shulafin said, "Yes, we conducted a large-scale screening and caught 19 spies. I personally interrogated 5 of them. The others will be sent to Lodo-san prison for further questioning. But now there's a big problem. The restrictions no longer work on them." Lonen was shocked. "What? What are you saying? The restrictions don't work anymore?" Shulafin said, "Yes. During our investigation of the 19 people, the restrictions didn't work on any of them. They might have removed the relevant restrictions. I think we can assume that." "Damn, this is really annoying. Is there no other way now? Do we have to identify them one by looking at their magical power?" As Lonen was deep in thought, Shulafin stood up, preparing to leave. "All right, I'll let you know if there's any news. Finally, I'm looking forward to seeing you again at the upcoming midterm exam." Lonen looked completely confused. "What are you talking about? Exam?" 2 days later, on an island controlled by Philip's Academy, Nibiros was explaining the midterm exam rules. "As you know, my course focuses on practical combat. I'd really like to send you to a battlefield for practice. But according to school guidelines, that's not possible. What a pity, it would have been fun. However, my assessment method is also good. I will scatter you across this island for an unlimited, real duel. Of course, don't worry about dying, because I've prepared equipment for your safety." She pointed to bracelets on a rack and said, "Once the wearer of this bracelet loses their ability to fight, they will be automatically sent to the Academy's plaza. The Academy's best healers are there." Suddenly, Nibiros excitedly said, "So everyone can treat this as a life or death battle. You can use any strategy and technique. If you have the ability, go all out." Lonen was startled to see Nibiros so excited for the first time. "Next, I'll call names to come get bracelets. When you put on the bracelet, you'll be teleported to a fixed coordinate. First, Andershan." Lonen watched Andershan walk out slowly, feeling somewhat worried. Others were discussing among themselves. "Andershan? She's just an odd jobber. She usually attends classes with me, and now she's taking the exam with us too? That's good. With a fool like her, we won't be in last place." Hearing this, Lonen was furious, but he thought, with the Grand Commander's current strength in the assessment, she would only be beaten badly. So for the Grand Commander, the best decision is. The next second, when Andershan put on the bracelet, she was immediately teleported away. Then everyone was teleported out. Lonen was also teleported to somewhere on the island. He first looked around and found no one else nearby. Was I transported to a place with just me? Am I that lucky? Is it really as I wished? Then Lonen gave a cold laugh and said, "Stop hiding, come out, senior. You seem very nervous. Damn, why did I meet this monster right at the start?" The next second, the student hiding behind the tree immediately jumped into the air, swinging a large axe fiercely towards Lonen's head. After the smoke cleared, a long sword was at his neck. Lonen said, "You're going too far. Is this how you treat your junior classmates?" "As your junior, this makes me a bit unhappy. It seems that you people, who were teleported to the same place, have formed a temporary alliance. Maybe because this is Philip's, so your ability to handle various situations is not bad, but..." Before he finished speaking, Lonen threw a stone at extremely high speed. The long-haired man in the tree was hit before he could react, falling hard to the ground. "This isn't your best strategy." Seeing this, the black-haired leader immediately shouted, "The ambush failed! Everyone prepare for battle. Even if he's a monster, he's still alone. We have the advantage in numbers." In an instant, all those hiding revealed themselves, then rushed desperately towards Lonen. A moment later, Lonen slowly sheathed his sword and said, as expected of second-year students, it still took some time. Just then, movement ahead caught Lonen's attention. 3 male students had surrounded a battered female student. One boy said, "I didn't expect you to hold out so long. The game should end now. You should give up." Andershan. Though covered in wounds, she was still carefully observing her opponents and forming a strategy. "I may have exceeded my limits, but it seems these two have lowered their guard. And with third-year honors student Ayun leading, they definitely believe they can't lose, making them relax and expose weaknesses. I have only one chance. In one breath, end it all." Andershan swung her sword horizontally across the ground with lightning speed. The two hadn't time to react. Next, Andershan had already flashed in front of them. When her sword fell, blood immediately spurted from the two, but Andershan didn't stop. She charged towards third-year Ayun at 180 miles per hour. But as she approached, Ayun's weapon suddenly appeared before her. When did he? Andershan quickly blocked with her sword, but Ayun's strength was too great. Andershan immediately spat blood, her body flying back tens of meters. Ayun said, "You think such a small trick could defeat me? How pitiful. Andershan, you're a smart person. You know that no matter how hard you struggle, you can't beat me. It's interesting to watch you struggle, but this ends now." Observing from the shadows, Lonan wasn't surprised by the outcome. Because from the beginning, he felt Andershan shouldn't participate. But reflecting on the strategy she used in battle, it was enough to prove her talent. She fully utilized the environment to create opportunities to distract her opponents. Quick and decisive strikes, demonstrating an incredible talent for strategy. However, in the face of absolute strength, even the best battle strategy is useless. I'm certain now. The exam is over, Grand Commander. Don't suffer here anymore. Andershan isn't badly hurt. She'll probably be sensible and withdraw voluntarily. So Lonan slowly got up to leave. But the next second, the sound of a sword being swung interrupted him again. Andershan actually launched another attack. Even Ayun was surprised by her action. Ayun said, "What are you doing now? Do you really want to end up seriously injured?" Andershan said, "Of course. Ayun, the exam isn't over and neither am I." The next second, Andershan quickly jumped behind him. Andershan swung a precise and decisive sword at Ayun, but he still blocked it. However, Ayun's face was cut, leaving a shallow sword wound. Ayun's expression immediately turned extremely ugly. Angry, Ayun said, "You're asking for trouble," then slashed at Andershan without mercy. Andershan was sent flying by the strike. Ayun said, "This makes me look stupid in front of a foolish student. I'm curious who's supporting you behind the scenes, making you do such stupid things. I've always been curious about your background and abilities. You don't have talent like that new student. Why do you struggle so hard? Shouldn't you know better than anyone that everyone thinks you have no hope? What are you persisting for?" Hearing Ayun's question, Andershan's thoughts were pulled back to her childhood. Her village was left with only her due to the war. A man hugged her, crying bitterly. At that moment, she seemed to find the path she would take in the future. Andershan said firmly in a low voice, "Because I must become the Grand Commander at all costs." After hearing this, Ayun said contemptuously, "What? Grand Commander? What nonsense are you talking about? You?" Andershan said, "Because no one else can fulfill that dream for me." Lonan was shocked by her answer. Andershan continued, "But I believe in my destiny. You will never understand." Ayun said, "Get lost. Talking about dreams, you don't even know your place. I don't want to hear your nonsense anymore." Ayun gathered strength for a final strike against Andershan. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Ayun's weapon instantly broke in half. Lonan appeared in front of Andershan. Lonan said, "I didn't want to interfere, but that's enough, senior." Ayun looked bewildered. Before he could react, he had already taken a hit from Lonan's sword. Though angry and unwilling, Ayun was helpless. Andershan looked at Lonan with confusion, blurting out his name. "Lonan?" Lonan said, "Are you okay?" Andershan replied, "Yes, thank you for saving me, but why are you here?" Lonan said, "Let's skip these trivial details. I want to ask you something. Why do you want to be the Grand Commander?" Andershan said, "You want to know why I want to become the Grand Commander? Why ask so suddenly?" Lonan nodded firmly and said, "It's important to me, so please tell me." Seeing Lonan's serious expression, Andershan was silent for a moment, then lowered her head sadly and said, "Do you know about the Night of Evil Wolves?" Lonan said, "You mean the werewolf invasion 10 years ago?" Andershan said, "Yes, that war between the Empire and the werewolves. The former wanted to expand territory northward, while the latter wanted to stop them. It was that very night that I lost my family. It was at dinner time. My mother and brother received orders from the front line. That was the last time I saw my mother. She was so kind and gentle. I hadn't even finished talking to her. Before she left, she didn't even eat dinner. Afterward, according to the commander's strategy, the village soldiers were sent directly to protect the castle. They ended up being torn apart by strong werewolves. It was simply sending them to their deaths with absolutely no strategy to speak of. Without knowing the disparity in strength, having no strategy led to a tragedy. Lonan, you should know that shortly after that, the Empire and werewolves negotiated a ceasefire. Eventually, the Empire agreed to give land to the werewolves, and the werewolves joined the Empire's army. While my village was destroyed and my family sacrificed, all I got was a useless tombstone. Although they nobly sacrificed for the Empire, I couldn't accept it. Watching disabled warriors ask why they had to die, I instantly felt immense anger. Because none of them had to die. If there had been peaceful negotiations from the start, if they had used geographical advantages, if there had been an excellent Grand Commander, At this point, Andershan choked up. I can't bear this fact. I want to become the Grand Commander so there won't be any more needless sacrifices. I will become a perfect commander. Then no one will need to build tombstones for those who should have lived. After hearing Andershan's passionate dream, Lonan just silently looked at her, creating an instantly awkward atmosphere. Lonan said, "Sorry for bringing up your bad memories, but it helped me understand something." Andershan asked, "Understand something?" Lonan didn't answer but fell into deep thought. It seems impossible to make her give up now, but this means he can no longer just be a bystander watching her get killed. He can't bear that painful feeling anymore. As the two were lost in thought, a cold wind blew from the nearby forest. Looking back, it was a huge storm. Lonan said, "Looks like he's here. There's not much time, so I'll be direct. Do you know about shadow magic?" Andershan said, "Shadow magic? What's that?" Lonan said, "The conditions to awaken it are tricky, but once you meet these conditions, you'll quickly become stronger. I know someone who reminds me of you, so I think you can use it too. I'll help you awaken it later, okay?" Andershan said, "Wait, why are you suddenly saying this?" Lonan grabbed Andershan's shoulder with one hand, smiling at her. "Don't worry, I'll support you fully. Let's work hard together." Andershan was touched that Lonan had taken her to heart, emotions rushing in. But the next second, Lonan suddenly pushed Andershan off the cliff. Andershan looked completely bewildered. Lonan said, "That's enough for today. Third place isn't bad. I'll come see you as soon as I get back." Watching Andershan being teleported away, Lonan felt relieved. Lonan said, "So now it's just us left?" A person walked over slowly. It was Shulifin. Lonan looked at him provocatively and said, "Why are you everywhere? It seems you've dealt with all the opponents on your way." Shulifin said, "Yes. There's only you and me left on this island. No need to say more, let's fight." Both quickly gripped their swords. "Give it your all. Let's see who is the Academy's." The next second, the two figures turned into lightning bolts charging at each other, the strongest pervert in the school. Meanwhile, Andershan, who was teleported back, lay quietly in the Academy Plaza. Soon she woke up from her faint. Seeing her body intact, Andershan knew she'd been eliminated and teleported back. Recalling what Lonan said before pushing her, "You're already in third place. This means the remaining two must be those two." People around her were gathered in front of a huge screen watching. The screen was broadcasting the duel between Lonan and Shulifin. A powerful sword aura blocked a huge storm. After the dust settled, two figures flew by rapidly. Facing the powerful storm sword, Lonan changed his strategy, avoiding its sharpness first. But Shulifin pursued relentlessly. While chasing, he again imbued his sword with even more powerful storm magic, then swung mercilessly toward Lonan. At this moment, two huge storms appeared behind Lonan. This madman actually split the storm sword in two to deploy. Getting hit would be fatal, but its power is dispersed. The next second, Lonan charged toward the storm at 180 miles per hour. Swinging his sword at the two storms, the sword style was exactly Nabiros's technique. The two storms were actually cut with a vertical small opening, and the storm's power had leveled the rocks on both sides. "I still can't cut through it. If he increases his storm power to the limit, I might not be able to win. What happened to this guy? Compared to when we caught Dalen together, his storm sword is more exquisite. And before, his speed was much slower than mine, but now it's almost as fast. This madman is stronger than he was at the same period before I crossed over." Shulifin was also surprised by Lonan's performance. Although I haven't unleashed the full power of the storm sword, he actually chose to block it head-on. So he can cut off magic power. Not to mention, he can use the coach's sword technique so perfectly. Although I'm stronger in techniques, I've reached my limit in increasing speed. I need to end this quickly. Lonan knew that with Shulifin's growth rate, once he adapted to his fighting style, he would have no way to win. He couldn't drag it out any longer. Both tightly gripped their sword hilts. The next second, Shulifin suddenly gave an eye signal. His and Lonan's figures immediately disappeared from their spots. Only flashes of blades could be seen in the air. As the two landed, Lonan bounced out again, charging toward Shulifin at extreme speed. Seeing this, Shulifin gathered several storms into his sword. When he swung at Lonan, it formed a huge, long storm. Lonan broke into a cold sweat, disappearing into the storm. After the smoke cleared, the ground was left with a huge storm track. But Shulifin knew Lonan hadn't been defeated, so you have no choice but to avoid the storm sword, using this interval to plan an ambush. As soon as he finished speaking, Shulifin's body had several sword wounds, blood splashing. Before he could react, Lonan was already behind him. But Shulifin smiled slightly and said, "You always surprise me." Lonan said, "You can still smile after being cut?" Then, two sword lights flashed past. In the midst of light and shadow, both were hit by each other's swords simultaneously. Blood immediately spurted out. But the next second, the two quickly withdrew their swords, launching even fiercer attacks again. The sword energy from both spread out, as if to envelop the surrounding ground under their sharp edges. Their eyes briefly met, only to laugh coldly. The breathtaking duel between the two made the watching students tense. My god, is this really a freshman duel? To be honest, these monsters should be tested separately, and the geographic environment doesn't affect their performance at all. Nearby, Andershan couldn't help but worry for Lonan. Nabiro smiled. Quite an interesting duel. They've both made great progress since entering school. However, they've both reached their physical limits. Whether they like it or not, the next move will determine the outcome of the match. Amidst the flashing blades, their bodies were already covered in wounds. Shulifin said, "This is exhilarating. Coming to Phillips was the best decision I ever made. Meeting an opponent like you, it's time to end this duel. Lonan said, yes, let's decide the winner. If we keep fighting like this, I'm afraid I'll fall in love with an opponent like you. As soon as he finished speaking, the two quickly jumped apart. As they landed, Shulafin concentrated and quickly gathered magic power, saying, I won't hold back, so show all your strength too. Streams of magic power gathered with Shulafin at the center. Seeing this, Lonan called him crazy. Lonan said, I must bring you to our team, but before that, I need to make you submit through combat. Lonan's gaze locked firmly on his opponent, lowering his head to accumulate strength in an attack posture. The next second, Lonan disappeared from the spot at extreme speed. Shulafin only saw a flash of sword light. Lonan had already leaped behind him. Shulafin was stunned. No way, he's injured but got even faster? In his shock, he looked back. Lonan attacked again, dozens of sword shadows forming a net of heaven and earth. Shulafin smiled bitterly. Now I don't have the energy to keep up with this speed, but if he's going this fast, the burden on his body must be very heavy. Hasn't he thought about the consequences? Thinking this, Shulafin tightly gripped his sword, frantically thrusting it into the ground, completely ignoring Lonan's attack. When the sword entered the ground, it released powerful energy. Lonan immediately swung his sword to block. What a madman. I thought I could win with speed. Didn't expect he would release Magic Blade right in front of himself. With his injuries, he can't precisely control his magic power, so he must also be damaged by his own attack. Does he want to win that badly? But so do I. I don't want to dodge anymore. We're both at our limits, we can't delay anymore. I need to get close to him immediately. At this moment, Lonan rushed up like a madman, decisively and quickly giving Shulafin a sword strike. But Shulafin laughed coldly, saying, I knew you would do this. You met my expectations. Then intense storms gathered on Shulafin's sword. Lonan was startled. I put everything I have into it. With Shulafin as the center of the storm, several storms quickly gathered to form a huge storm vortex. Storm sword. The next second, a lightning bolt fell from the sky. Then the sword momentum became as fierce as a rainstorm, forming a devastating storm sweeping the surroundings. In an instant, the earth shook and mountains moved. Sword energy like a rainstorm from the sky bombarded Lonan. After the smoke cleared, both had dozens of sword wounds on their bodies, blood immediately spurting out, but Lonan could still stand up. He immediately jumped into the air. Madman, if you want to die, don't drag me along. The damage from his storm sword is enough to threaten his own life. When it comes to swordsmanship, he's truly insane. This is you, Shulafin. I also think coming to Phillips was my best decision, but in a duel between us two, you would definitely lose. As soon as he finished speaking, after unlocking the first taboo, Lonan actually attached a small amount of magic to La Mancha, then launched a final attack against Shulafin. Shulafin struggled to grip his sword. This tense moment left everyone watching dumbfounded. Finally, the match was about to end. At this moment, both used every ounce of strength they had left, fighting with all their might. Shulafin fought desperately. The clash between the two created an explosion. After the smoke cleared, both were still standing. Both bodies were covered in wounds. Shulafin slowly said, nothing left. As soon as he finished speaking, Shulafin slowly fell down. Lonan said, seems you collapsed first, which means I won. Before Lonan could finish, he also slowly fell down. After both collapsed, neither got up again. All the spectators held their breath, hearts racing with excitement. The next second, cheers erupted throughout the plaza. When Lonan opened his eyes, he found himself already lying in the infirmary. Andershan said, you're awake, Lonan. Lonan said, is the exam over? Nibiru said, yes, the exam is over. You two were really risking your lives for that duel, and you even destroyed the island. But it was truly a magnificent battle. You woke up before him, so at least you're stronger than him in terms of stamina. Lonan said, does that mean I win that bastard? Just as Lonan was feeling smug. Nibiru said, no, because you two were teleported back at the same time, so it was ruled as a draw. Lonan was stunned for a moment. Well, if that's how it is, then there's nothing we can do about it. Lonan's response surprised Nibiru. She said, your reaction is better than I expected. I thought you would throw a tantrum and say you couldn't accept such an ambiguous result. Lonan touched his head proudly and said, is that how you all see me? This outcome of the duel is fair and reasonable. Besides, Shulafin is strong, much stronger than I anticipated. Obviously, this means I'll have to train harder from now on. Next time, I'll definitely win. Hearing Lonan's words, Nibiru nodded with satisfaction. This guy's abilities have matured, and so has his mindset. Yes, there's no need to argue. This was clearly a good experience for both of you, especially you, Lonan, because you finally managed to use the magic you've been longing for. Lonan was surprised and said, wait, what did you just say? I can use magic? Nibiru said, wasn't that last move you used magic infused? A true combination of sword and magic. Lonan looked at his hands. Recalling that moment, he indeed felt something different at that time, so this is... Nibiru said, yes, this is what we call sword aura, when you can use magic. Compared to the inner energy you've been imitating before, its depth is on a completely different level. But judging from your reaction, you haven't fully mastered how to use it, so you need to take action because unlike other students, we don't know when your physical condition might impose new limitations. Andershan, take Lonan to see that useless bastard at first light tomorrow. Useless bastard? Are you referring to Professor Jordan? The scene changes to the Academy's Grand Plaza. Lonan and Andershan are on their way to Professor Jordan. Lonan said, since Professor Nibiros recommended him, he must be very strong. Andershan said, he is considered a master in the field of magic use, which is why other professors often seek his help. Previously, when a student accidentally lost control while using magic, Professor Jordan solved it effortlessly. Lonan said, that does sound impressive, but why does Coach Nibiros seem to dislike him? Andershan said, probably because they have different personalities. You'll understand when you meet him, but the professor is kind of unique. Lonan remained silent after hearing this. Then he smiled slightly and thought to himself, that's not important to me. What matters is that he can help me use magic. And since he's so skilled, he should know about the Grand Commander's magic. Before crossing over, I didn't learn much about her shadow magic. Seeing Lonan silent, Andershan asked, I heard you met with Shulafin before coming here. Did he agree to your proposal? Lonan said smugly. Of course he agreed. That guy would never refuse my proposal. It turns out that after being discharged, Lonan had arranged to meet Shulafin. Shulafin said, it seems we think alike. I can't accept this result either. After saying that, he drew his sword with fighting spirit and said, let's settle this once and for all. But Lonan casually said, I dislike this result as much as you do, but I called you here for another reason. Shulafin said, another reason? Before Shulafin could react, Lonan immediately took out a piece of paper. He said, join my club. Shulafin said exasperatedly, what? This is the reason? You want me to join the club of the enemy who defeated me? How absurd. I refuse. If you keep talking nonsense, I'm leaving. Lonan fell silent, but he immediately grinned wickedly and said, club members are planning a fun housewarming celebration, and she happens to be moving in too, my sister Eli. When Shulafin heard this name, he became as excited as if he'd been injected with adrenaline. He said, what did you just say? Eli is moving there? Tell me more details. Where? Is it a safe place? Have you arranged guards for her? Seeing Shulafin so anxious, Lonan refused to tell him. Lonan said, I won't tell you. Why should I tell someone who's not in my club? If you join now, I will. Before he could finish, Shulafin waved his hand. Shulafin said, the name is already signed. Do I meet the requirements now? Now I hope you can explain everything clearly. Thinking about Shulafin yesterday, Lonan was stunned and worried at the thought that one day he would become the Lord of Granzia. Suddenly, Andershan stopped walking, looked up and said, all right, we're here. This is where Professor Jordan stays, Tower 41. Looking at this eerie castle, Lonan couldn't help but be surprised. This place looks really weird. Suddenly, a voice sounded from behind. Hey, you sword-carrying thug, Professor Jordan. Andershan said, Professor, because Lonan has always had difficulty using magic, Coach Nibiros told us to find you. Jordan said, she sent you here just because you can use magic power? You must be a very promising student. What do you think, Lonan? Lonan said, yeah, nice to meet. Before Lonan could finish, Jordan interrupted, how much have you prepared? I don't do charity. Work outside working hours must be paid. After saying this, he extended his hand to Lonan. So I know you must have money ready, right? Lonan said in shock. You want money now? Jordan said, yes, and by the way, it's at least 10 gold coins per hour. Lonan thought he was joking, but seeing his serious expression, he was 100% certain that he really wanted money. Lonan said, I don't have money now. Is there no other way? Jordan said, no, go make enough money and come back. Just as Jordan was about to leave, he sensed a familiar magic power from Lonan. He immediately stopped and said, there seems to be a way. Come with me, I'll make a deal with you. Lonan was stunned. This terrible guy is really terrible. What he didn't know was that it was the magic power emanating from the ring given to him by Sarante that attracted Jordan. When Lonan said it was from Sarante, Jordan led them in. Lonan looked at his barely furnished home and couldn't help but wonder if this was really the home of a paid professor. At the same time, he noticed that the moment the door closed, he could no longer hear sounds from outside because of the numerous magic arrays on the door. If he wasn't a professor, one would suspect he was a perverted murderer. As Lonan was still observing his surroundings, Jordan asked, may I see that item? Lonan handed over the ring and said, this is a precious item, so please be careful. Jordan said, don't worry, it's precious to me too. Jordan said, I can feel its magic is very pure, which must mean he spent at least 2,000 years learning all elemental magic. Lonan was shocked. He could tell all that? Jordan said, my condition is simple. Please allow me to extract a little magic from the magical ring. Lonan asked, extract magic power? Jordan said, yes. I've been working on an experiment for a long time, and I need the magic of a species that has lived and mastered magic for a long time. It seems you have a good relationship with him, for him to give you such a valuable gift. Lonan reflected on his moments with Sarante. Lonan said, yes, if you agree, I promise to help you with all my strength. Although it sounds good. I have one more condition, help solve Andershan's problem too. Seeing Lonan bargaining, Jordan said unhappily, the magic power I need is very small, yet you're adding another condition. Lonan said, if you don't want to, that's fine. We can leave. Jordan said, that's too much. I didn't say that. In the end, Jordan agreed to Lonan's request. Jordan said, you even have talent and negotiation skills. Lonan said, thank you for the compliment. Jordan said, if that bad guy introduced you, then the matter must be urgent. He then pointed to a magic array and said, please stand on it. After Lonan stood on it, Jordan began to cast a spell to examine him. He said, it seems you haven't regained your magic sense for long. There's almost no trace of magic use in your body, which means you've never used magic before this. Lonan said, yes, I can only see it now, but I've never used it before. Someone cursed me. Jordan said, this is no ordinary curse. The source of magic power has just slightly opened and is now trying to close. I will guide my own magic to forcefully open it. You'll feel pain like a knife cutting your spine, but you can endure it, right? Lonan said, what are you going to do? The next second, painful screams echoed throughout the room. Oh my god, what the hell? Andershan was also scared and didn't know what to do. As Jordan cast his spell, his consciousness slowly penetrated into Lonan's magic source, gradually opening his source of magic power. Jordan said, the resistance is less than I expected, so it's opening well. If it continues like this, I think things will end quickly. Suddenly, a strong surge of red and black magic attacked. Jordan couldn't help but tremble. Streams of red and black magic were wrapping around him. As he looked up, he saw a pair of eyes full of killing intent staring at him. What is this? How can such a thing be in his body? The next second, his consciousness in Lonan's body was completely incinerated. Back to reality, he immediately stopped casting, but the red and black magic tried to wrap tightly around him. Jordan immediately cast a spell to repel it. As a result, he was thrown tens of meters away. Then he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. Not only did the amount of bleeding increase dramatically, but his body was also convulsing. Lonan and Andershan hurried over to support him. Jordan immediately recited a spell, Open. As soon as the words fell, the magic array on the ground emitted light. Lonan recalled that this magic was very similar to the one Elizabeth had cast before. The next second, a giant mouth swallowed them. At the moment it closed, Secret felt something unusual in the office. Jordan suddenly opened the door. What happened to him? At this time, Lonan and the others had already appeared in front of them. Seeing Jordan continually vomiting blood, Secret didn't bother with greetings and immediately went to check his condition. Jordan kept coughing up blood. Lonan was beside him, which made Secret wonder if it was related to Lonan's curse. Secret said, Lonan, did Jordan channel his magic into your body? Lonan said, yes, he said he could open the sealed magic source in my body. Secret said, I understand. I believe part of the curse in your body may have transferred to Jordan. This is an extremely evil curse that no one except you can easily deal with. Looking at Jordan's unstoppable bleeding, Secret broke into a cold sweat. At this rate, Jordan will die. Lonan awkwardly said, you're saying Professor Jordan will die because of my curse? Secret said, I mean, if he doesn't receive treatment soon, that could happen. Thank goodness the magic hasn't taken deep root yet. Lonan, prepare for battle. Lonan excitedly gripped his sword and said, so we're removing the curse now? Secret didn't respond but focused on casting a spell. The next second, a multi-eyed monster flew out of Jordan's body. Secret grabbed it and quickly threw it to Lonan. Lonan swiftly swung his sword. There was only the sound of the blade leaving its sheath, and the monster was already covered with several sword marks. When Lonan sheathed his sword, its body was completely sliced apart. Then it turned to dust. Andershan hurried over to check Jordan's injuries. Jordan said, thank you, Secret. You saved my life. Secret said, that's because you made a quick judgment. I told you before about a student with an extremely severe curse, one I've never seen before. Jordan said, damn, was that monster the curse? After dealing with the monster, Lonan immediately ran over to check on Jordan. Professor Jordan, are you all right now? Jordan said, yes, thank you. I've had a new experience. This is the first time I've seen such an absurd curse exist. Your life must be very twisted. Anyway, I kept my promise. Lonan looked on in disbelief. Jordan said, Secret, can you check Lonan's condition? Then Secret glanced at Lonan. How is this possible? Magic is flowing in Lonan's body. I really can't believe it. Although it's weak, the magic channels are flowing. Lonan, have you recently had someone remove the curse? Or fallen into a pit full of curse eyes? Lonan said, no, nothing like that. Secret said, for some unknown reason, the curse blocking your magic channels has weakened. At this moment, a strange power is eroding the curse, like rain and wind weathering a huge rock. Of course, your curse is still trying to close your magic channels. But due to this unknown power, and Jordan widening your magic channels, it's not easy to close them anymore. After hearing this, Lonan excitedly said, does this mean I can use magic now? Secret said, yes, but to use it freely will still take some time. If you train every day, in 20 years you'll be proficient. Hearing 20 years, Lonan's heart sank. Lonan said, what are you saying? 20 years? How could I possibly wait that long? Secret said, you need to overcome it through individual training, and this is a treatment method that won't endanger your life. At this point, Jordan stood up and said, there is a way to shorten the time. It depends on your effort and determination. If you use the magic practice method I invented. Moments later, Jordan prepared to cast again to continue opening Lonan's magic source. Jordan said, Lonan, the magic power you can use now is very limited. The magic channels you've just opened are much narrower than your classmates. But if you learn this practice method and continuously expand your channels, in the future you can greatly increase the magic power you can use. It also depends on your ability. In about 5 years, you should be able to use magic normally. Hearing about 5 years, Lonan was still slightly dissatisfied. Jordan said, now I will guide my magic to help you sense the path of your own magic channels. Although this is risky, it's only possible when the curse is temporarily weakened. Lonan said, thank you, Professor. Jordan said, then, let's begin. As soon as the words fell, bone-chilling pain instantly exploded throughout Lonen's body. The reason this practice method differs from others is that you need to adjust your speed and direction and manage it to the extreme. Lonen listened while enduring the pain and said, "Don't rush, guide the magic as carefully as possible." Jordan said, "Those weak paths that have been suppressed for a long time are likely near the breaking point. In the future, you'll need to use magic power to supplement them. Follow the path drawn by my magic power, then your magic will become your strength. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Lonen said, "Yes, I understand. Let me try it myself." As soon as he said this, streams of red magic power began to gather on Lonen. Jordan was stunned. He memorized it after I guided him through it just once? Is his comprehension and management ability that strong? Haha, no wonder that bastard saw talent in him. He's indeed different. Good thing you learned so quickly. I won't touch that curse again. If you have time, repeat this once a day. After Lonen walked through the magic channels, a trace of red magic appeared in his palm. He said, "Is this my magic power? I've finally had a breakthrough. I'm changing, constantly changing myself from the past. Back then, I couldn't even imagine having magic power. Now, this is enough." "Thank you very much, Professor. I finally understand why your fees are so expensive." Just as Lonen was rejoicing, the weakened Jordan collapsed again. Lonen shouted, "Professor!" But he struggled to get up again and grabbed Lonen's hand. "Lonen, I've solved your problem now, so please keep your promise too." Lonen said, "I understand, but please take care of your health first." Jordan said, "My health doesn't matter. What's more important is that I must save someone. Even if it costs me my life, I'm willing. So please give me the ring." Lonen frowned at the severely injured Jordan, feeling he had lost his rationality. Secret said, "He's pushing himself, always so impulsive and crazy. It seems that research needs this ring. Jordan, my friend, how long will you live in the fetters of the past?" The scene changes. The three step onto the magic array to return to Jordan's castle. Andershan said, "Hurry, Lonen, let's run to the academy's nearest clinic. We can get there in 5 minutes." Just as the two were rushing out, the main door was locked with several large locks, and there were magic arrays on the locks. Andershan looked helplessly at the door covered with magic arrays. At this moment, a hand reached out from behind. It was Jordan, who was murmuring a spell. Then he pointed to the back and said, "You should return that way." Moments later, a door appeared on the wall. Seeing that the door was wrong, Lonen said, "Professor Jordan, you should the door that has magic arrays on it." But Jordan insisted on going down. "I need to go down," in front of her roses. Lonen looked at her in confusion again, but finally entered the door, following the dim staircase down when they reached the basement. The horrific scene before them shocked them both. Dissected goblins, various knives, and a golden-haired beauty surrounded by numerous flowers. Her eyes were tightly closed, as if she had been asleep for a long time. "So the professor is so desperate because of this woman?" Andershan said. "Judging from the current situation, that's likely." Lonen said, "Andershan, you take care of her for a while. I'll see if there's anything useful around here." Then Lonen looked around. There were countless strange things, and traces of medical experiments he had done on monsters' living bodies. Clearly one could tell at a glance that this was no ordinary experiment. Suddenly he discovered a notebook on the table, then glanced at Jordan. What exactly does Professor Jordan want to do? Lonen slowly opened the notebook. "I'm almost done. Just wait a little longer, Sonia. Fortunately, I preserved her body before it decayed further. As long as it's preserved, I firmly believe I can bring my wife Sonia back to life. Although everyone says there's no precedent for successful resurrection magic, I will never give up. These are records of my fight to save her. 54th resurrection attempt. Even the heart of an ogre bought from the northern black market didn't work. I'm adjusting the Wizard Tower's work schedule to conduct my experiments, but my absences have reached the limit. CH resurrection attempt. Due to my absences, the Wizard Tower fired me. Without pay, I cannot continue my experiments. With Principal's help, he gave me a professor position. I moved Sonia to the basement of Tower 41. From today, I am a professor here. I have no choice, it's the only way to make money. 81st resurrection attempt, 96th resurrection attempt, 134th resurrection attempt. My experiments still show no progress." At this point, Lonen understood why he wanted money. The materials in the basement were definitely not easily obtained by normal methods. So, everything he did was for love? I have seen people who put everything into love, they go crazy for it. At this moment, Lonen thought of Shulafen. It seems I have such a person around me. At this point, there was a red square attached to the notebook. The notebook recorded, "The problem is that most such people don't end well, especially if someone exploits your weakness to get close to you. I think I have to accept a deal with the devil." Lonen picked up the red square and pondered. Was this suspicious letter also sent by those devils? But I can't let. At this moment, Jordan called out to Lonen from behind. "What are you doing now? You didn't touch my things, did you?" Lonen looked at him, remained silent for a long while, and said, "Of course not. I was looking to see if there was anything that could help you recover. As someone who can't use magic yet, I wouldn't understand even if I saw it." At this moment, Lonen slipped the red square into his pocket. After coming out despite his injuries, Jordan took the ring. A moment later, Jordan returned the ring to Lonen. Lonen looked at the ring in confusion. It doesn't seem any different. Jordan said, "I said I would only extract a small part, especially since the magic power in the ring is already quite substantial. I know you must be a bit shocked after seeing my experiment. This is my desperate measure. Please keep it confidential. Lonan touched his head nervously and said, of course, I don't want to get involved in other people's business either. Seeing that, both agreed. Jordan thanked them softly. Then he told Andershan, we'll solve your problem another day. There is unusual magic power inside you. After everything was done, the two headed back, each busy with their own affairs. On the way back, Lonan looked at the square letter he had managed to take out. Could Professor Jordan be connected to the Nebula organization? Thinking about this, Lonan slowly opened the letter. He saw only a pool of blood on the paper. Just as Lonan hesitated, the bloodstain actually turned into a mass of fresh blood that flowed out. Lonan watched in disbelief as the blood floated in the air. The next second, this mass of blood suddenly burst open, forming a pattern with regularity. This is a letter written by a vampire, a voice responded from behind. It was Ophelia. She said, because I sense the power of blood, I came here, but I didn't expect it would be you. The two returned to the club building to avoid drawing attention. Lonan said, a few days ago you took Sheeta for research. I thought you were busy. Is your research going well? Ophelia said, thanks to Sheeta, I've made quite a bit of progress. I taught Sheeta some blood magic as payment. It really has more talent than I expected. When you see it later, you'll be shocked. But how did you get a blood letter? Lonan said, blood letter? You mean this paper? Ophelia patiently explained. The so-called blood letter is one of the basics of blood magic. It can compress information into a drop of blood, so vampires use it for communication. If you inject magic power into it like this, then you can see the hidden information. The message revealed by the blood letter was, if you want to obtain blood essence, then come to me, Blood Hook. Blood essence seems to be an ingredient needed for the experiment mentioned in the professor's diary. This means those devils aren't the Nebula bastards. Ophelia said, so it's Blood Hook? So they're the organization behind this? Lonan said, do you know them? Ophelia said, Blood Hook is a new organization made up of young vampires less than 200 years old. They're a bunch of immature children. They want vampires to return to their golden age and do all sorts of dirty things to get what they want. But it's strange that they possess something that's rare even among vampires. Blood essence. Can you tell me who received the letter? Lonan hesitated and was reluctant to answer. If that person happened to agree to that request, he might suffer a fate worse than death, eventually becoming a puppet. After a long silence, Lonan slowly said, it's something from Professor Jordan's laboratory. After hearing this, Ophelia felt uneasy. She said, you mean that top mage who left the wizard tower? Lonan said, top mage? Is he that famous? Ophelia said, he's famous even among vampires, and is one of the elites on the entire continent who has reached that level. Lonan said, so impressive, then he should be able to easily defeat Bloodhook and take the blood essence, right? Ophelia said, indeed he could. But if what he wants is the blood essence, then the situation is different. This is something formed from the inherent magic fusion within vampires. They have been using blood magic for a long time. It can concentrate the energy of people's blood, so it has incredible effects. But if the owner of the essence is not a vampire, without blood magic to activate it, it's just a useless red stone. In other words, it's impossible to obtain blood essence without their cooperation. Lonan said, so the professor has no choice but to accept their demands? Ophelia said, yes, I can probably guess what conditions they proposed. Lonan didn't want Jordan to be in danger, and at this moment, he had an idea. A moment later, Ophelia handed a bottle of green solution to Lonan. She said, I made the transformation potion you asked for. With this, you can maintain Professor Jordan's appearance for at least 30 minutes. It doesn't last long, but its effect is reliable and can fool Bloodhook's eyes. Lonan said, although the time is short, thank you. Ophelia said, although they may still be young, they're at least 100-year-old vampires. I still feel it would be safer to go with you. Lonan immediately refused her, saying, no need. If you get into conflict with your own kind over this matter, it might put you in a difficult position. Don't worry, I won't get hurt. As for whether they'll get hurt, that's another story. At midnight, 4 men guarded the entrance to a cave. At the same time, a figure walked forward. The blood slave candidate the leader mentioned has arrived. His name is Jordan, a top mage, but I can't feel his powerful magic. Don't let your guard down. He's someone who once faced Sword Saint Nebiros head-on. Hello, are you Jordan? Yes, but I don't see your master. He's waiting inside. Can you take off your hood first? We need to verify your identity. The disguised Lonan stared at him for a few seconds, then slowly removed his hat and said, is this okay? Yes. Thank you for your cooperation, Sir Jordan. I'll lead the way now. At this moment, the black-haired man stared at Lonan's sword. Isn't he a mage? Why does he carry a long sword? But before he could think more, Lonan approached him and said, do you want to die? I'm sorry, Before he could finish, Lonan's sword had left its sheath, and the black-haired man was instantly cut in half. Before the other vampires could react, their bodies already had several sword wounds. By the time Lonan stopped, the vampires in front were dismembered. The short-haired man said in terror, why? You're not Jordan. Before he could react, Lonan grabbed him and said, from now on, you only need to answer the questions I ask. Unless you want to become a kebab. The scene changes. Lonan walks deeper into the cave. There are no traps on this road. It seems this vampire is quite honest. If I had known he was this sincere, I would have spared his life. But they are all extremely evil. This place looks a bit strange because the patterns on the wall and the atmosphere feel somewhat familiar, like I've seen it somewhere before. Suddenly, a scent of blood wafted over. There are more important matters now. A terrible smell of blood is penetrating through the door. What have they done to make me feel it through this thick door? Lonan slowly opened the door. The scene before his eyes shocked him immensely. The vampires were enjoying their feast. The blonde man sitting in the middle said, "You've arrived? This must have been a long and tiring journey. Welcome, Jordan. I am the leader of Bloodhook Anais Tafa. I'm sorry for the mess. You came later than expected, so you caught us eating. If you haven't eaten yet, you can join us for dinner." Although Lonan was shocked, he quickly calmed down. "It's too late to save them now. I should focus on my goal here." He said, "Thanks, but I'll pass. I find it a bit nauseating." The other vampires looked at him provocatively. "I came here only for the blood essence. So what are the conditions for this deal?" The other person said, "I think you might have already guessed. You need to sign a blood pact. With your life as the contract condition, you must become one of us. That is my entire requirement." Lonan said, "Your request is absurd. You want me to become your slave." The other person said, "Dear, it's really a shame you think that way. This is already a lower price. This opportunity allows you to escape your humble flesh and gain honor beyond your wildest dreams. We are bringing new life to our family, and to do this, we need to overthrow the older generation immersed in pacifism. I'm giving you a chance to stand at the forefront of a historic moment, as a glorious warrior fighting for the revival of our race. What do you think? Isn't that an honor unimaginable for humans?" Lonan said, "Honor? I don't know, but I think you're all insane beyond imagination." The other person said, "Haha, I understand. As a human, it's certainly difficult for you to understand our deeper intentions. It's okay. You just need to know that this is your only chance to get blood essence. If this deal fails, you won't have any other way to obtain the essence." Lonan said, "From the current situation, if I refuse, it seems you don't intend to let me leave either." The other person said, "Haha, that's right." After Anais snapped his fingers, the other vampires all stood up, quickly preparing for battle. Anais said, "This should help you make a choice. Don't think about resisting. You must have noticed the abnormal magic flow. This is the trap I specially prepared for you. No matter how skilled you are with magic, as long as you're human, you can't use magic here. Since things have developed to this point, think slowly. You wouldn't want your beloved wife to become a delicious blood bag, would you? And you don't want to become like those corpses over there, right? Accept this contract now, and it will be over soon." But Lonan smiled slightly and said, "You bastards. You've prepared so thoroughly I almost fell for it." As soon as he said this, Anais was startled, because at this moment Lonan dropped his disguise. Anais said in panic, "You're not Jordan. Who are you? How did a human get in?" Before the many vampires could react, Lonan had already struck first. Between flashes of sword light, Lonan walked straight through. Lonan said, "How I got in doesn't matter, you bastards. Today is the day you die."